One after working his fingers to the bone for the hero party, Chris meets a miserable end, but then, he opens his eyes and finds himself breathing. Reborn as a filthy rich young master, it is crazy. The catch is he is no ordinary noble. He is Christian Van Baron Khazar, the family black sheep, a useless bastard born into the dark magic clan. He has exactly 2 years before his scheduled death, and even if he somehow escapes that fate, he still has to stop the apocalypse. So if Chris wants to survive and enjoy all that wealth, he has only one move left: take over the dark magic clan, become the next demon king. Sounds impossible, right? Not to him. Why? Because the guy is a genius. With the world ending right before their eyes, the hero apologizes for being too weak. He says Chris should have been the hero instead. The mage tries to comfort him, saying they all did their best, but even she secretly agrees. If the genius Chris had picked up a sword a little sooner, he would have easily gone past the ninth star, maybe even reached the 10th. If that happened, Evan and Chris might have been able to stop the entire apocalypse together. Back then, Chris was called the Great Extra, a title earned from all the legendary achievements he stacked up. His talent was so broken he could master anything almost instantly. His story started at 20, right after running away from a trash noble house to survive in the rough back alleys. Then came the invasion. The blood monarch of the Arcane Empire struck, the nightmare later known as the Era of Destruction. That led to the creation of the Heroes Party. For Chris, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. He wanted to rack up major achievements, then cash in on wealth and glory after the war. Too bad fate had other plans, because that whole setup crashed hard. The Heroes Party lost. The forces of light ended up in the Blood Monarch's hands. The hero wishes they could turn back time and make Chris the hero instead, but Chris wants no part of that idea. Even if time actually rewound, he has zero interest in going through that nightmare again. One lifetime of pure suffering is already more than enough. No way is bro signing up for a second round. Besides, none of that matters now. The world is literally about to end. Chris never believed in a next life, but if one existed, he figured he would love being born as the son of some filthy rich noble, and incredibly, that is exactly what happens. He wakes up inside the body of a young master in the Arcane Empire, the House of Dark Arcana, one of the 12 prominent families supporting the Empire. After looking into things, he confirms that he has gone back 15 years, meaning he returned to a point exactly 5 years before the Era of Destruction begins. He thought he had seen it all, but even he did not expect to see literal demonic beasts out here, working in the garden like unpaid landscapers. Then he checks the mirror and immediately recognizes the face staring right back. He is now Christian Van Baron Khazar. Back in his past life, he learned that the middle name Van meant someone came from a cadet branch of the Magus League. The Khazar Count family is one of those cadet branches under the Baron Count family. They belong to the House of Dark Arcana. As a cadet branch, they are still officially part of that lineage. More importantly, they are absolutely loaded. The household has 2 sons lined up for succession, and the eldest, Christian, is infamous for being an absolute scumbag. He caused so much trouble that even the Khazar family eventually gave up on him. It was not because he changed, though. His own flesh and blood decided they had to get rid of him. Talk about a family intervention going completely south. Chris only wanted to wake up as a normal, wealthy kid. Instead, he lands inside the body of a guy carrying a major death flag. 3 days have passed since he woke up in this unfamiliar body, and Christian is scheduled to die exactly 2 years from now. Since the proud Khazar family values honor enough to execute him themselves, Chris can only assume this guy really was terrible. If he keeps his head down, perhaps he can cheat fate. At first, that seems like a solid plan. Stay quiet, enjoy the endless money, and live comfortably. But there is one massive problem with that strategy. Ragnarok, the end of the world, is still coming. The Blood Monarch starts a war to sacrifice humanity and trigger the apocalypse. By the time humanity figures out the plan, it is already too late. The faction of light and the Magic Empire both end up completely destroyed. If Chris wants to survive, he has to stop this total annihilation himself. The Blood Monarch presents a massive threat, but the real nightmare is the army of demons who serve him. To prevent this future, Chris has to surpass that monster. He must rise as the next demon emperor, standing at the very top of the magic empire. He has exactly 5 years before the era of destruction begins. After thinking it over, he realizes doing nothing only leads straight to a grave. If he succeeds, everything in the empire will belong to him, first, though he has to clean up all the absolute chaos Christian left behind. His father calls him in, giving a chilling warning. If Christian acts up again, the Count will personally end him. Count Khazar has such overwhelming presence that even Chris feels the crushing pressure. Still, he apologizes for his past behavior. He has to completely shed Christian's awful reputation as a worthless scoundrel if he hopes to make his grand plans work. Count Khazar is deeply shocked by this sudden apology, but he does not buy it for a second. He refuses to trust a single word from the mouth of a son who has committed so many vile acts. Chris can hardly defend himself, especially while trying to make sense of the original Christians' horrible history, so he simply admits that destroying his father's trust is entirely his own fault. Still, he brings up the sudden memory loss from 3 days ago, as he has been trying to recover them. He claims he painfully realized just how terribly he used to live. That still is not nearly enough for the strict Count, because he claims he has heard these fake repentance speeches countless times before. Chris agrees that cheap words mean nothing, so instead of begging, he offers to prove it with action. He asks to enter the punishment ward for a full month to reflect and show everyone he has genuinely changed. The punishment ward is where high-ranking demons get locked up when they commit crimes. This is a brutal place that shuts out not just light but all 5 senses. A few days is enough to break most people. But for Chris, it is actually the perfect hideout because he needs somewhere completely out of sight. Count Khazar, however, finds it utterly impossible to believe that his son wants to stay in the punishment ward for a whole month. He knows for a fact this spoiled punk would not even last half a day in there. Still, Chris insists it has to be harsh. If he can endure this, maybe his father will finally trust him. Count Khazar quickly reminds him that he has heard this exact kind of talk many times, and every single time Christian let him down. Even so, he decides to give him one last chance. If absolutely nothing changes after a month, he will disown him completely, which, in their world, is basically a death sentence. Once the family protection is gone, there will definitely be no shortage of people ready to come for Christian's head. Even so, Chris accepts the condition and asks for one request to be granted if he actually proves that he has changed. Count Khazar thinks his son is awfully full of himself for someone who believes he can walk out of that hellhole, but he still agrees. If Christian really gets his act together, then he will grant him that one single request. Chris is just relaxing in his room when Cox, the family butler, arrives to inform him that the punishment ward is finally fully ready. Christian heads there. But as he walks through the long hallway, the servants start whispering about the fact that he volunteered to go in there on his own. They bring up when he insulted the daughter of the Poison clan, forcing his father to personally apologize. Since the clans were rivals, that massive mess completely wrecked his father's reputation. Still, they gossip that maybe this time he will finally grow up, though absolutely nobody believes it. They are already betting he will not survive half a day, and honestly, who can blame them? The guy has zero credit left here. Soon, Cox and Christian arrive in front of the punishment ward. Chris notices they have a death knight standing guard, which is the most magic empire thing possible. But he does not care as long as they stay outside the cell. Just then a voice calls out from behind. Chris turns around to see a very familiar face. It is Christian's younger brother, Van Baron Khazar, the family's gold star good kid, and that golden boy draws his sword and points it straight at Christian. A move like that would terrify anyone. But Chris stays cool, asking what he is doing. Tern calls him a disgrace to the family and warns that if he stains their name again, he will kill him himself. Chris wonders if this kid killed Christian in the original timeline, back when the era of destruction was raging. He had actually met Tern before. By then, the kid was a notorious demon feared for curse magic. Right now, though, Chris honestly thinks he just looks like a hardworking little kid. He tells him to move aside. To someone who survived the worst of the era of destruction, Tern is just a brat. Chris tells him to go home, then steps inside the ward without a single backward glance. Tern is left standing there utterly speechless, completely thrown off by that cold attitude. Christian steps inside the punishment ward, and the place is exactly as terrible as expected. He cannot see and he cannot hear anything at all. There is only the faintest feeling left in his fingertips, probably just so he can fumble around with the supplies given to him. Chris quickly realizes that any normal person would lose their mind in here almost immediately. For him, though, this is not much of an issue. Back when he worked as a treasure hunter, he went through things far worse than this. Honestly, having his senses shut off is exactly what he wanted because it lets him focus completely inward. That is the only way he can fix this broken body. He starts combining all the knowledge he gathered in his previous life, the medical techniques he learned through brutal experience when people called him the divine hand, along with the body modification methods he picked up from the circus, come together into one technique: bone reconstruction. On top of that, he has mana crystals infused with different types of energy, which means this crazy plan might actually work. Chris assumed there was no way he could get his hands on mana crystals because they are insanely expensive, but being part of a wealthy, elite family definitely has its perks. Even the request of a spoiled brat gets granted without much trouble. In his previous life, Evan and Chris had to go through absolute hell just to find things like these. The first step is using the white mana crystal to purify the toxins and waste built up inside his body. He has to manually cleanse every contaminated part using white mana. If he makes even one mistake, he could end up horribly disfigured. For anyone else, this would be a complete nightmare, but for Chris, it is basically light work. Count Khazar asks Cox about Christian, and the butler tells him that he obediently entered the punishment ward. Still, Cox is worried that Christian may become too broken in there to even call for help. Count Khazar starts regretting the decision. Christian used to be a promising child, but somewhere along the way everything went wrong and he still has no idea why. Whatever the reason may be, the Count thinks that if his son is only going to keep living in such a pitiful state, then maybe it would be better for him to become a cripple or simply die. He remembers Christian's determination when he asked for this chance, but after being deceived so many times already, the Count refuses to expect anything from him now. He asks Cox whether anything unusual happened before Christian entered the ward. Cox hesitates, then admits that Christian took magic stones with him. Among them was a dream stone, one that causes hallucinations. Cox urges the Count to open the punishment ward because they have no idea what side effects it might cause, but Count Khazar refuses. He says they should just let him die cold, but this family clearly does not do soft parenting. A month passes and Count Khazar stands in front of the punishment ward expecting the worst, but when the door opens, he is shocked to see Christian walk out alive and unharmed. Christian steps forward and reminds his father that he promised he would come out changed. Count Khazar sees the look in his son's eyes and is reminded of how Christian looked when he was still a child. Even so, he keeps his voice is ice, simply saying he survived the brutal month. Christian takes this as praise, but his father snaps, warning him not to get arrogant over a basic test. Now you might think Chris barely survived that insane month, but that is completely wrong. Honestly, the guy did not have even a single second to feel bored. First, he completely rebuilt his body to hold his legendary swordsmanship. Thanks to that white magic stone, it felt as if every single cell in his body was completely reborn. On top of that, that forbidden dream stone turned out to be a massive jackpot, classified as a dangerous narcotic magic stone. Even his butler scolded him for taking it, but it was absolutely worth the gamble. Through the intense hallucinations it caused, Chris slashed the time needed for his full transformation, and he even managed to form two separate cores. Naturally, he hides the light core right behind the dark one so nobody notices. If the demons ever find out, this entire place will go absolutely ballistic. It would be great if things ended there, but someone was clearly hoping he would lose his mind under those toxic illusions. Chris simply decides to use that spite as fuel for climbing to the absolute top. Whoever tried to sabotage him just handed him free power. Talk about a major backfire. Back in the present, Christian reminds his father that he kept his promise and now he wants his reward. Count Khazar tells him to spit it out. Chris asks to use the training grounds Of the famous Black Swamp Knights, his father instantly snaps at him because that is no place for some trash scoundrel to wander into. Those knights are one of 3 legendary orders protecting the Dark Curse, where only elites get to train. Chris quickly explains he only wants to borrow the space. He tells him that watching those fearless warriors would be deeply inspiring. Joining their ranks is definitely not his plan, he just wants to observe. Count Khazar thinks it over, then finally gives his permission. At the same time, he warns Christian to brace for the consequences if he embarrasses himself in front of the elite knights. The Count turns to leave, but Chris stops him with one more request. Later, Chris enters the training grounds, and nobody gives him even a shred of respect because of his reputation as a useless, brainless young master, and honestly, that is totally expected. In this magic empire, raw power beats status every single time. Still, Chris has a massive goal. He needs to get inside the archives, but Count Khazar made it clear he needs a formal recommendation letter from Vice Commander Melon first. The archive holds the ancient dark magic tomes of the house, making entry absolutely vital if he wants to master his powers. He did ask his father why his family rights were not enough to let him in, but Khazar reminded him that Christian once tried to sell high-level magic books on the black market. Yeah, even Chris has to admit that was peak trash behavior, so now his only real option is to earn the vice commander's approval immediately. But just as he takes a step forward, his younger brother blocks his path. The kid sneers, calling him filth that does not belong here. Chris finds Turn incredibly annoying, but this might actually be the perfect opening. Turn glares, giving him one final warning. He orders him off the training field unless he wants to throw away the life he barely saved from the punishment ward, but Chris just casually asks if Turn can actually back up those big words, because the person who gave him permission to train here is their own father. That is enough to make Turn shut up, but another person with equal respect for the Count steps up and declares that this whole setup is still completely unacceptable. Chris instantly recognizes her as Vice Captain Melon. She immediately tries to crush him with the raw magical aura of a 4-star mage, but Chris is completely unfazed by this petty display. He just bows politely in greeting, leaving Melon totally shocked that a weakling can shrug off her intense pressure. Chris calmly explains that he knows he has to prove he actually belongs on these training grounds, so he proposes a quick duel with any mage present to settle things once and for all. Should finally settle the matter, but he wants one specific condition first, since his body is still weak from years of living like a spoiled brat. His inner mana channels are not ready for a real magic battle, so he requests a simple bare-handed fistfight. Melon finds this entire situation incredibly annoying because she cannot allow the family heir to get seriously hurt on her watch, so she asks if he is actually being serious. Chris confidently nods, then points at Turn and chooses him as his opponent. Turn instantly loses his temper at the sheer disrespect of the challenge, and even Melon advises Chris to pick someone easier because Turn is already a 2-star mage. That is not a level a normal 13-year-old ever reaches. Without real genius, even people in their 20s struggle to get there. But Chris is no longer that weak, spoiled noble trash. He calmly explains that to truly prove his worth, he needs to face someone stronger, making his arrogant younger brother the absolute perfect choice for this match. Then he drops a massive provocation, asking if Turn is simply terrified of his own big brother. That pride-shattering question instantly forces Turn to accept out of pure rage. Talk about total ego damage. Soon, both of them face off inside tense ring of onlookers, where every single person in the crowd cheers for Turn. Chris remains perfectly relaxed and asks how they will decide the winner. Melon declares that the duel only ends when one of them cannot stand up anymore. Secretly, she hopes Turn breaks at least one of Chris's legs. Chris pretends to look shocked for a brief second, then warns Turn that he is about to get destroyed. Turn starts screaming curses and throwing out wild threats, but before he can even finish his sentence, Chris cracks a heavy punch straight into his jaw. The match has officially started. Turn wipes the blood from his face and desperately counters. On paper, this entire fight is completely unfair since Chris has not even reached the level of a 1-star mage. If they were strictly clashing with magic, he would not last 10 seconds, but Chris has already survived blood-soaked battlefields in his past life. On top of that, the special inner star he unlocked during his punishment has actually boosted him straight to the 3rd star level. So, while the crowd expects an absolute slaughter, what they actually witness is their genius. Young master getting thrashed so brutally he starts coughing up fresh blood. That is, when the quiet onlookers begin to realize that something is terribly wrong, Chris mocks him, asking if he needs to gently comfort his pathetic little brother. Turn furiously demands whatever trick was used, but Chris just loves the absolute panic on his face. He calls his opponent weak, then twists the knife further by calling him small. That completely snaps Turn. He pulls magic into his fist and blindly charges forward. But Chris is already waiting, sidestepping the desperate swing with effortless grace. He funnels mana into his own fist, landing a brutal counter that drops Turn cold. Total silence hits the arena. The watching crowd is left entirely speechless. Most people try to cope, claiming Turn obviously held back to avoid killing him. Even the instructor Melon is completely dumbfounded by this ridiculous outcome. Reluctantly, she announces that Chris has officially earned his right to train here. Chris keeps a perfectly blank face, but inside he is grinning. He wants everything: the swordsmanship, the magic, the whole package. He finally hits 1 star in magic, though it took some serious work. Managing mana in Christian's broken body is still highly awkward and clumsy. Plus, there is plenty of toxic residue left over inside this vessel. If he wants to combine his light power with magic, he must climb higher. Needing answers, he rings the bell to summon his personal maid, Marie. Except his helper turns out to be an actual banshee. Having a literal high-ranking evil spirit as a maid is highly unnerving. But given Christian's trash reputation, normal humans refuse to work here. He casually requests a simple glass of juice before his next training session. Instead, Marie deadpans and asks if he would prefer freshly spilled human blood. Chris sighs, repeating that he wants normal strawberry juice. Yet she keeps pushing, insisting that blood has a much better flavor profile. He literally has to raise his voice just to get a simple, normal glass of fruit juice. The original Christian truly left behind the absolute strangest living conditions. Striding down the corridor, Chris runs straight into the head butler, Cox. Cox feigns deep concern, warning him not to overdo the heavy training. He smiles warmly, claiming he always had complete faith in his young master. Chris immediately despises this fake attitude, irritated by the sudden pivot to loyalty. Cox immediately lowers his head to offer a quick apology before quietly stepping away. Yet Chris cannot shake the feeling that this man is deeply suspicious. Arriving back at the training grounds, the entire atmosphere feels different. The watching eyes are noticeably softer, lacking their usual sharp hostility. Their defenses are slipping, and honestly, his plan is working beautifully. He starts stretching, unaware a nearby birdman is rushing off to report. The scout informs Melon that the troublesome noble has returned once more. Melon still cannot read his motives, but that duel is rent-free in her mind. Turn's execution had been flawless, yet Chris caught the opening perfectly. He even managed to entirely disperse the thick, swirling demonic energy. It forces her to wonder if he predicted the entire combat sequence. If so, his natural talent might eclipse the main family's direct heir. That would put him far above Ishid de Baron, but she shakes it off. Christian is just a lazy rogue who thoroughly trashed his own body. Years of heavy drinking should have completely dried up his mana reserves. She absolutely refuses to believe this pathetic failure actually possesses genius. Hearing a racket outside, Melon steps out. What is going on? A guard reports, a small fight broke out between Christian and his squire. The squire Chris beat was a 1-star mage, meaning Chris is 1-star too. Standing right in the crowd, Chris loudly starts trash-talking everyone nearby. He claims the Black Swamp Knights are nowhere near as impressive as rumored. Calling them cowards, he is clearly trying to provoke a fight. Right on cue, a massive guy named Thorn steps forward to face him. This is perfect. Chris wanted someone to take his bait all along. These proud knights would never willingly teach their secret moves to him. So be it, if they will not teach him, he will steal. Watching Thorn's grip and stance, he reads his every move. He matches it to the legendary mud sword technique, copying the pattern instantly. Down he goes, one swift hit knocks Thorn out, shocking everyone. But for Melon, this absolutely confirms her earlier suspicions were totally correct. Meanwhile, Chris sighs in fake disappointment, blaming it all on their vice commander. Melon steps up, warning him not to get cocky over one lucky win. Chris just grins, he dares her to show him their real skill. Suddenly, Melon snatches a sword from a nearby knight and swings. The strike misses, it blasts the dirt right beside him instead. As the ground literally splits open, Melon stands tall amidst the dust. Her mana overflows as she tells him 1 second is enough to finish him. Chris smirks, asking if she is really going all out against a nobody. He challenges her to limit her magic to first tier and ban dark magic. Melon agrees, but she promises she can still break both his legs. Chris happily bets his legs while she promises he won't walk out alive. Melon agrees, mockingly stating that he won't be walking away today. She lunges forward first, but Chris blocks her heavy strike cold. Using only a wooden sword, he clashes with her as sparks fly. Honestly, nobody expected him to survive even a single strike from her. Even Melon is stunned, none of her attacks are actually landing. He should be far too weak to face her head-on, yet he is. It completely reminds her of how he handled Turn and Thorn earlier. Chris mocks her, noting that things are not going her way at all. She cuts him off, launching a huge magic slash that he barely dodges. Chris closes in, suddenly he smashes his forehead right into hers. She staggers back, blood drips from her nose in complete shock. Chris grins, his cheap trick worked because Melon relies too much on magic. Without her dark spells, she simply lacks the pure martial arts to counter. Once she recovers from the blow, Melon actually bursts out laughing. She admits she never saw that headbutt coming and underestimated him. Watch out, now she plans to finally take this fight seriously. Too late, Chris calmly tells her the match is already over. During that headbutt, his fingernail lightly grazed across her bare neck. If he had used poison, she would be dead on the floor. Melon admits defeat, but she immediately demands a rematch. Chris points out that another duel means another bet, stepping closer with a grin. He demands a specific reward this time, asking in a low voice if she will kneel. That is a bold move, he is going straight for her absolute loyalty, but Melon objects. She says that is impossible because her allegiance belongs solely to the main Baron family. They are the heads of the dark magic clan, but Chris just smiles and shrugs. If he becomes the heir, that issue vanishes. Melon thinks he is being completely ridiculous. After all, the 5 official heirs are all direct descendants. Chris knows this well, but reminds her that branch family members are not banned. Anyone can compete. He accepts her challenge on the spot and lays down the terms. They will fight again in 1 month, with absolutely no restrictions holding them back. Melon warns him that he stands zero chance, but Chris remains completely unfazed. He remarks that sometimes even a fragile egg can shatter a massive rock. While bowing politely, he is secretly determined to win her absolute submission. Later, Chris delivers Melon's glowing recommendation letter straight to his father. Count Khazar already read her report, calling Chris a literal magical genius. She described their surprisingly fun duel where Chris easily came out on top. The Count is genuinely stunned to see his son finally turning things around. Yet he stays quiet when Chris cheekily asks why he is staring so hard. Keeping his promise, Khazar hands over the heavy key to the secret archive. As soon as he leaves, Chris celebrates his major victory in private. He has the key, and even better, he managed to sway Melon. She is a key demon who becomes a major powerhouse in the future. A high-ranking 6-star force that he absolutely needs on his side. Having her loyal is his ticket to controlling the entire dark magic faction. She is not fully convinced yet, but 1 month is more than enough time. After all, he is a genius, but then he remembers Khazar's expression. Even demons possess family bonds. Khazar might actually be a decent father. Far better than his dad from his past life, making him feel quite responsible. He does not want to disappoint him. Stepping inside, he explores the massive library. The shelves are packed with bloodline magic, summoning guides, and dark curses. Everything here is highly forbidden by the self-righteous light faction. He reaches for a volume, only for Marie to pop out and terrify him. Phasing straight through the wood, she reveals she is actually the librarian. She playfully asks if he wants to keep her as his personal maid. Chris immediately tells her to shut up, but she just laughs it off. Teasingly, she says his mean attitude makes her heart flutter, provoking him further. She points out that he grabbed a complex 4-star black magic spell. It is the seal of binding, a technique far beyond his current tier. She doubts he can comprehend it, but Chris simply claims his usual genius. Marie stares blankly, then awkwardly agrees that he is handsome and brilliant. She then wonders if there is a specific reason he wants this spell. Chris nods, he needs this exact magic for a very specific task. He is trying to catch a rat. Later, during training, he starts scheming. He begins sorting through potential suspects, starting with a man named Turn. Out of everyone in the estate, Turn absolutely loathes him the most. Past delinquent behavior, the next prime suspect is Cox since he has free access to the punishment ward despite being an outsider in the magic world. Raw power usually outweighs family status, yet Chris still finds it suspicious how Cox keeps hovering around him, constantly trying to suck up, but there is also the chance that an unidentified third party is actually calling the shots. Regardless, the truth is clear. Someone desperately wanted his mind broken. They even snuck an illusion stone into the ward. Absolutely insane. To flush out the rat, Chris decides to play his best card, acting like a useless delinquent again. Mid-training, he suddenly stops and starts yelling. He loudly announces he is quitting. The onlookers are completely speechless. Honestly, talk about an incredibly fast regress to delinquent fake out. Later at dinner, Chris aggressively dumps his entire plate of food. He screams that the servants should have served him a proper high-quality meal. After a harsh scolding, he demands they take the garbage back immediately. Watching this, Count Kazar snaps, calling himself a complete fool for believing Chris had actually changed before storming out. Now Chris does feel a bit guilty. But he reminds himself that this show is necessary to protect the household. Over the following days, Chris goes all out to spread rumors that his old terrible personality is fully back. He makes sure the entire estate knows it. He starts terrorizing the cleaning staff and burning through piles of money again. Demanding heavy alcohol, he is stopped only by Marie swapping his drinks for juice. Since he is technically underage, it is probably for the best anyway. As long as he looks the part, he is totally fine with it. Still, Marie worriedly asks if he is truly going back to his old ways. Promising she will stay by him forever, feeling slightly guilty, Chris decided to confess the truth. He quietly explains that he is actually hunting a rat. Marie is amazed that he has already mastered the advanced seal of binding. Chris proudly admits he modified the spell, making it castable even at low star levels. Plus, while pretending to goof off, he has secretively studied other magic. Right on cue, Turn suddenly bursts through the doors, catching them off guard. Instantly, Chris reverts back to his sloppy drunk act. Turn looks absolutely furious, seeing the relapse, but Chris is quietly thrilled by his raw, honest reaction. This genuine anger means Turn is definitely not the enemy, clearing his name. Deciding to fully trust him, Chris lets his brother in on the whole secret. A traitor is lurking, playing along is the only way to catch them. He even shows Turn his fake wine bottle to prove he is completely sober. Stunned, Turn asks who the mole is, but Chris cannot say for sure yet. The target will strike soon. To sell the performance, he suddenly smashes his glass. A servant instantly rushes inside. Chris immediately slips right back into character. He slurs heavily, demanding another bottle of wine. The servant says Cox is busy. Chris snaps that he will hunt Cox down himself. Turn is completely stunned. He can barely believe this wild show is actually just a calculated act. Chris corners Cox, slamming a fresh bottle of wine directly onto his desk. No warning, Chris dumps the entire bottle of wine right over his head. He complains about the cheap vintage. Cox stands up, dripping and absolutely furious. When Cox offers to bring the correct wine, Chris demands he fetch it himself. Cox trembles with silent fury, muttering about chores, but Chris ignores his complaints. Chris pats his cheek, ordering a quick wardrobe change. Cox is absolutely seething. Yet he somehow swallows his rage and leaves. Chris has to admit the man's patience is impressive. Honestly, his patience is wild. While the butler is away, Chris spots some interesting paperwork lying on the desk. What he finds brings a smirk to his face. If Cox is indeed the spy, this makes perfect sense. He would obviously be messing around with the administrative side of things too. Still, these files are not quite enough to act as concrete proof. Soon, Cox returns. Carrying a fresh bottle of wine, the butler stands quietly. Chris asks if he is still upset. Naturally, Cox denies it. Chris playfully mentions that despite the attitude, Cox is his favorite butler. Slipping back into business, Cox mentions that Chris's usual friends want to meet him privately. They are waiting at the regular spot. He adds that Chris should probably avoid that crowd. But of course, the butler claims it is not his place to judge the young master's friends. Chris tells him he actually wants to meet them, and Cox obediently nods along. Internally, Chris is thrilled. Things are moving much smoother than he originally anticipated. Later, Chris meets up with his regular crew, who immediately comment on his sudden attitude change. Apparently, some pretty wild rumors have been spreading, but looking at these guys, it is immediately obvious they are trash, forcing a little kid to pour drinks. He raises the glass to his lips, but his instincts flare up instantly. Sensing something highly off, he splashes the entire drink right into his friend's face. The guy is completely stunned, but Chris already knows they tampered with his alcohol. Acting quickly, he casts a sleeping spell on the poor young girl. Then he leaps onto the table, grabs both men by their hair and slams them down. Painful screams fill the air as Chris beats them down properly. They scream at him to calm down, but Chris just glares, asking if they are truly this stupid. If they still cannot comprehend why they are being thrashed, they deserve to die. After delivering some more hands-on education and tying them up, the men finally break. Both of them admit they had orders to drug him and fake a murder. When Chris demands a name, they hesitate, prompting him to deliver another terrifying threat. That does the trick. The trembling man quickly spills that Cox was behind the entire scheme. Chris forces them to swear absolute loyalty, promising to obey his every future command. With sealing magic applied, these clowns realize they are completely trapped. They completely folded under the slightest pressure. Meanwhile, Cox rushes straight to the Count. The butler frantically reports that Chris murdered a girl and dumped her body. Count Khazar is absolutely furious. This scandal is simply too massive to quietly cover up. This means dragging Chris before the demon court for immediate summary judgment. Standing in the shadows, Cox wears a satisfied smirk. His trap worked perfectly. In the demon court, Chris firmly maintains his complete innocence. Count Khazar cold-heartedly reveals they have a witness, but Chris claims that is impossible. Nothing even happened, so this has to be some sort of bizarre mistake. Right on cue, the doors swing open. The supposedly dead girl slowly walks in. Walking in completely healthy, she testifies that Chris actually helped her. After she passed out, he carried her home and even paid her rent. The real culprits are his friends, the ones who actually spiked the drinks. Chris is pretty happy that things are finally going his way, but he knows this whole mess still needs a proper ending, so he casts a spell to bind the two accusers. Instantly, they confess that their entire report was a total lie because Butler Cox ordered them to frame him. Cox immediately loses his cool, shouting that Chris and the others are setting him up, but Chris saw that excuse coming. Since he is the actual victim of this scheme, he steps up and asks his father for full permission to interrogate Butler Cox under the Count's direct authority. Count Khazar studies his son silently before finally giving him the green light, warning Chris that this power will be stripped away if he makes one wrong move. Armed with that warning, Chris steps forward to take command of the room. He coldly forces Cox to swear twice that he will speak nothing but absolute truth. Right after, Chris channels dark magic to trap the butler under a binding curse. Hold on, a beginner pulling off a 4-star spell like the Seal of Binding. Everyone is completely stunned, but they do not know he secretly tweaked the magic formula. So even low-rank mages can cast it. The only catch is that it requires those 2 oaths first. Cox starts shaking, trembling in terror as he realizes he is trapped. Chris triggers the magic, demanding to know why Cox framed him. Under the spell, Cox helplessly admits he was acting on orders, then blabs that his mastermind held leverage over his dirty secrets. He was strictly ordered to ruin Chris's life, and he had been doing just that since Chris was a kid. Chris mockingly notes they already uncovered his years of theft, then steps even closer. Who ordered this? He flares his magic again in this. Cox finally screams the name Ashid Debaran, second prince of the dark magic clan. The moment that name echoes through the hall, Cox tries to bolt, but Chris draws his sword and claims his head. Clean cut, Count Khazar is left speechless. But Chris calmly argues that he only executed a traitor while acting under the Count's explicit command. He simply did what had to be done to a criminal. Count Khazar demands to know why his son resorted to such extreme measures. Chris explains that if Cox lived, the main family would have just buried the truth. They would have swept it all under the rug. They cannot let them get away. With this, and now every single witness here knows what Ashid did. His plotting is out in the open. Count Khazar absorbs the truth then. Summons a portal and orders his son to follow. The tier leads them to a hidden training field far from any prying ears. Count Khazar stares at him, realizing his son is trying to block Ashid's path to the throne. Backing a royal heir decides their entire family's future power, so even if Chris acted correctly, the Count worries he moved way too fast on this. But since there is no going back now, he decides he would actually prefer backing the young princess, since the first prince is just a bloodthirsty maniac. That's when Chris drops a massive bombshell. He announces he's going to take the throne for himself. Count Khazar instantly laughs it off as pure madness. But Chris calmly points out that even branch family members can claim succession rights if they prove they have the strength. Count Khazar scoffs that the rule is just a theoretical formality, but Chris counters that if it meant absolutely nothing, Ashid would never have tried to frame him in the first place. Things down for a bit, the Count recalls that when Chris was younger, his genius easily beat Ashid's. He should have fallen far behind by now, but promises to catch up. Then, Chris asks his father to recommend him for the Som Hayuk Sik event at the main house in 2 months. Count Khazar warns him that only 2-star fighters or higher can actually enter, but Chris confidently claims he will hit 2-star within 2 months, and asks his father to train him. Soon the castle servants whisper that he has completely changed. They learn the Count is personally training him but doubt he can survive. It is the kind of brutal training even veteran knights absolutely hate. Count Khazar is taking family bonding to a brutal level. During training, Chris uses mud magic for control and the black scythe style for exactly as his father taught him. Count Khazar is completely stunned. He understands everything immediately. But the black scythe style was only taught to him today. Suddenly, Chris wonders if he really needs to use them separately, since combining them seems way more efficient to him, so he decides to prove it. Blending both styles, he targets a giant training human mushroom, a dummy tough enough to withstand a normal mud strike. Chris explains that he applied the core flow of the mud sword style to the black sickle's blade path. Sword, Count Khazar stands frozen because even he cannot pull off that kind of advanced move. Still, he argues that casting curses during such intense combat should be impossible. Right on cue, Chris casually fires off a curse as well, leaving his father completely speechless. The young master is basically speedrunning his way through the genius allegations. 2 weeks later, Chris collapses onto the dirt. He is completely exhausted from running but needs stamina to build a proper foundation for his next breakthrough. Suddenly, Melon walks up and coldly reminds him about their upcoming duel. Chris feels constant pressure from every single direction but still tells her he is trying to meet her high expectations. Melon admits he has gotten pretty good, but points out he is still rank 1, meaning she will never kneel before him. Chris pushes himself up. There is always something to gain, making it a win for both sides. Melon walks off after telling him to put on a decent show. As Chris watches her go, he considers the massive gap. She is rank 4. Upper, even rank 1 has 3 distinct divisions, upper, middle, and lower. Chris just reached rank 1 upper himself but has a major advantage. He is a wealthy young lord, essentially the ultimate wallet warrior. When he returns to his room, Chris asks Marie if she packed his bag. Of course, Marie is completely ready because she thinks this is their first actual date together. Chris dryly points out he never invited her along, but Marie just assumes he is worried she might faint because of the harsh weather. She insists that serving him is her highest priority, though Chris highly doubts her. He did not even know a banshee could faint. Honestly, he already asked his father to replace her with a human servant, but Count Khazar reminded him that Christian bound himself to Marie through a master-servant contract, since high-tier banshees cannot be managed without one. This revelation fills Chris with absolute dread, so he immediately asks how to break the deal. His father says the only way out is a deep kiss with Marie. To make matters worse, Christian apparently signed the contract while totally wasted. Chris cannot help but curse his useless disaster of a past self. The guy really turned every single corner of this new life into some side quest from hell. Chris tells Marie straight up that she cannot tag along because he is heading somewhere crowded. Marie looks completely heartbroken because she was actually excited about going out with him, but Chris stands his ground since her spiritual energy could hurt ordinary people if she accidentally lets it slip. That just makes her even sadder, and she explains that she has been stuck inside this mansion for decades without ever going outside. Ultimately, Chris's heart softens. He agrees to let her tag along, but warns her to stay hidden from human eyes. Marie immediately lights up with pure joy and thanks him while Chris tells her to hurry up. On their way, she asks where exactly they are headed. Chris says they are going to make a tidy profit. Marie lifts her dress slightly and points out that they already have plenty of cash, but Chris tells her he knows that. Then she guesses they must be buying estate properties or land deeds, but Chris says it is nothing like that. Instead, they are going to do something he used to excel at. But the moment he swings the carriage door open, he finds Tern sitting inside waiting for him, a total surprise. Sitting inside the carriage, his brother Tern coldly tells Chris that he is late. Chris asks what he is even doing there, and Tern explains he came to keep a close eye on him so he does not cause trouble again. Chris tells him not to worry because they are only heading out for some light gambling. He says demons should keep liquor and gambling close, especially since the demon Emperor himself encourages gaming as a pastime. Tern still insists on tag-along duty, but Chris smugly asks if the little bro is just worried about him. Tern snaps back he is only making sure Chris does not become yet another massive disgrace to their family. Chris figures this goody two-shoes is going to have a hard time today, while Tern silently vows to beat that annoying smugness right out of him. Chris just laughs to himself because Tern makes for the perfect prey. Now check this out, they arrive at a massive building that turns out to be a high-end casino. Tern and Marie look completely amazed, but Chris tells them to stop acting like total country bumpkins. He hands Tern a mask. They cannot just walk in without hiding their identities first. Then he whispers some quick, quiet instructions to Marie, telling her to stay hidden. She instantly vanishes, but Chris does not bother telling Tern where she went. The moment they step inside the casino, all eyes are on them. Local sharks immediately view them as easy prey walking straight into the trap. Chris is totally relaxed, playfully making a bet with Tern over how much they can win in just 1 hour, promising to treat Tern like his older brother if he loses. But if Tern loses, he is legally obligated to call Chris the ultimate honorable king emperor. Utterly baffled, Tern has no clue why this weird title exists, but Chris taunts him, handing over some extra cash to instantly fuel his intense, competitive pride. Chris plays, he easily takes his first victory. A bystander nearby urges him to keep playing to strike it rich, but Chris is already ahead of the game. He knows their trick, let them win early to inflate confidence. Once they are hooked, they are lured into massive, life-ruining bets. It is a textbook scam. Chris can tell this shady joint has found its first victim. Chris laughs about only losing 500 rup, but Tern admits his situation is vastly worse. Worse, the poor guy has already dropped over 1,000. Scanning the chaotic room, Chris realizes every single predator here has targeted Tern as an incredibly easy mark. Cheaters will strike soon. Right on cue, Tern snatches more of Chris's money. Tern wants to keep playing, while Chris silently prays he loses every single coin. Talk about a highly supportive brother. Sure enough, as Tern blindly throws more money down, someone pulls a cheap trick and completely wipes him out. Right then, Marie reappears. She quietly whispers to Chris that she finally tracked down those specific targets he wanted. Meanwhile, Tern loses another 10,000 rup, earning a proud thumbs up from Chris. Marie guides him to the spot. Chris tells her to open the door, then strides inside dramatically. The men inside instantly recognize him, nervously asking why he is here, but Chris demands their boss. Soon enough, Grantle, the head of the Grantle Trading Company, steps forward. Chris already knows this man has a pretty clean reputation. But behind closed doors, he secretly owns the exact gambling hall they just left. Chris casually remarks that Grantle has some serious, absolute nerve targeting his own younger brother. Grantle suddenly realizes that the absolute idiot in the tiger mask was actually Turn, heir to the House of Khazar, but he tries to play dumb anyway. He claims he has zero control over what his dealers do on the floor. Chris calmly asks if he has a death wish, and right then, Marie unleashes her terrifying aura. Terrified, Grantle drops to his knees and begins apologizing like crazy. Chris scoffs. Did he really think forgiveness was free? He immediately demands 1 million rup. Grantle stammers that they simply do not have that kind of cash, so Chris compromises. He lowers the price to 200,000 rup, but demands one extra little favor on top. Later, Marie admires the top-tier combat equipment he bought with that extorted money. She points out that the bonus sword he acquired is none other than the legendary Gruna. A holy blade, the ancient hero once traded his soul to possess it. Even after corruption claimed him, the weapon endured, though it is completely rusted now. Chris shrugs. He already has a pretty genius, highly secret plan to make it useful again. Next, he surprises Marie by handing her the beautiful necklace she was eyeing earlier. He says she looked like she would be haunted forever if she did not get it. She is profoundly moved, realizing this is the first genuine gift of her entire life. Actually make that both of her lives. Chris instantly gets incredibly flustered and dismissive. He tells her to quickly forget about it and hurry home, but she promises even better service. She vows to prepare her absolute best, freshly squeezed blood juice just for him. Chris recoils, but Marie casually drops a pretty terrifying truth bomb. That sweet strawberry juice he loves so much, it is already laced with her own fresh blood. Shuddering, he silently prays she is just playing a highly twisted prank on him. Brushing the thought aside, he figures he will remember it later. Suddenly, Turn bursts into Chris's room and drags him right out of bed, completely filled with rage. He left him stranded at the casino, nearly getting him sold off as a slave. Luckily, someone recognized his face just in time. Chris just yawns sleepily, offering a pretty lazy apology. He figures Grantle saved Turn, then reminds his friend that he lost their recent wager. Turn lost the bet, so now he has to keep his promise. He has to call him his honorable King Emperor Majesty Big Brother. The kid hesitates to say something so stupid, but his massive anger quickly wins out. He screams the ridiculous title, and Chris happily pats his head. Chris tells him to behave properly and show some actual respect. Turn leaves in a fury, swearing he will make Chris regret this. Chris remembers that in the original timeline, this angry kid actually grows up to murder Christian. He figures that future murder must have been orchestrated by Ashid. The guy is the acting patriarch's son and the current top-ranked heir. Chris does not hold any real grudge against Ashid, since he is not the real Christian anyway. But if he wants the succession, a fight is going to happen. A showdown is inevitable, but first he must secure some crucial backing. To win over Melon, that dusty sword lying in the corner might be very useful. The sword in his room is the legendary holy weapon Gruna. Many mages tried to claim it, yet it still sits in the corner collecting thick dust. None of them could tame it, leaving it like a discarded antique. Chris decides to see how the blade reacts, so he pours his magic power into it. Predictably, the reaction is hostile because the blade wields light power. But in the end, it is still just a weapon, no matter how sacred it claims to be. Chris decides he will simply shatter the internal pattern that rejects magic. He starts smashing the blade and can practically feel its holy pain. Leaning into that, he calmly threatens to keep swinging all night if necessary. The man is really out here bullying a legendary holy sword into cooperation. Pure madness. A few days later, Chris arrives at the training ground. Stepping into the secret area, he notices a brand new face waiting there. Recognizing the silhouette, he greets Mary, commander of the Black Shadow Knights. She is Marquis Langham's daughter, making her his biological aunt. She directly supports the clan leader and controls secret operations. Handling internal surveillance makes her one of their deadliest powerhouses. Count Khazar tells Chris that Mary arrived solely because of the Cox incident. Hearing this, Chris immediately starts to wonder about their motives. He wonders if the leader intends to protect Ashid, which would be quite problematic. He remarks that the patriarch must have too much free time to watch children's fights. Mary says the leader does not care about childish squabbles. But she says that the patriarch is actually quite curious about Chris and his progress. Chris sees this as the perfect chance to gain the leader's attention. Mary tells him she cannot decide if he is brave or just incredibly foolish. She warns him to back out of dueling Melon while he still has a choice. Chris says he already has a plan and displays the legendary sword to her. Seeing Gruna, she warns that he has officially crossed into reckless territory. She even scolds Count Khazar for bragging that his son finally came to his senses, especially when the boy is planning a full-scale duel with a holy sword. Chris reminds her that no rule forbids using the weapon as long as he wins. Mary snaps back, reminding him that even the clan leader failed to wield Gruna. Its volatile holy energy should have already burned a dark mage like him to ashes. Instead of arguing, Chris draws the blade, proving he can wield it without a scratch. Mary calls it a cheap fake, so Chris casually tosses the blade right at her. She catches it, but the searing holy light burns her hands instantly. Pain forces her to drop it immediately. Mary demands to know his secret. Chris shrugs. It is a trade secret, so he cannot share, but one thing is clear. Chris is an absolute genius, mastering a weapon that broke the clan leader himself. Count Khazar beams with pride, but a sudden laugh cuts the moment short. Someone laughs, drawing every eye as Mary steps out of a portal. She admits she is impressed he tamed Gruna, but warns him it changes nothing. Today is still going to be his last day, she warns, as Melon steps up. Melon charges at Chris with everything she has, completely unleashing her power. With all limits shattered, her speed and destructive power reach terrifying heights. The power gap is still massive, but the moment their blades clash, things change. Melon suddenly realizes the holy sword is actively disrupting her dark energy. Watching from the side, Count Khazar is stunned by his son's growth. Chris is already outpacing Melon's childhood self, and she notices his strange form. His own dark magic and the holy sword are working in perfect harmony. They blend seamlessly with every strike, though Count Khazar spots a slight instability. But Mary shakes her head. It is not unstable at all. Chris is micromanaging his dark energy, so the holy sword never rejects it. As their weapons clash, Melon asks if he is reading her every move. Chris just smiles. He happens to have a pretty good eye for these things. In the art of the blade, every single strike has a tell. To swing down, the arm must lift and the muscles must shift. Then the shoulders and upper body must shift, a rule affecting everyone. Annoyed, Melon unleashes a thick wave of dark energy to swallow him up. She reminds Chris that the Black Swamp Knights are, first and foremost, mages. But before her magic can land, the necklace around his neck begins to glow. The oppressive dark energy is instantly purified, and Chris smiles at his father. Count Khazar is speechless. That artifact should be locked in his vault. Chris casually jokes that he is actually pretty skilled at stealing. Besides, in a real fight, your gear is part of your power. He wastes no time, hurling a strange metallic ball straight at her face. She dodges the erupting black mist, only for Chris to throw another. The second sphere detonates right in her face, leaving him thoroughly pleased. That costly artifact he bought with Grantel's money was worth every penny. He calls out through the smoke, taunting Melon that he knows she's still standing. Right on cue, a deadly blade pierces through the flames in a sneak attack. But Chris is already waiting, casually parrying the blow with his holy sword. The holy sword shatters her weapon into pieces. Count Khazar finally realizes why. Chris threw the corrosion orb into the air earlier. Now he is proudly showing off too. His sister as if he personally planned this entire thing. Meanwhile, Melon steps out of the flames and rushes Chris again, enjoying this wild fight to the fullest. Mary can tell Melon completely lost herself in the battle and is ready to stop the match. But before she can intervene, Chris catches the attack barehanded, slips right behind Melon and puts his sword to her neck. Game over, Count Khazar is basically one proud father away from standing up to clap. Then Melon bursts out laughing, but Chris asks her to finally answer his proposal. He makes sure to explain she does not need to feel pressured because true loyalty cannot be forced. In the end, the only condition she gives for her loyalty is that they keep having duels in the future. Chris smiles. She can have as many as she wants. Later, Mary reflects on how Chris can control that demonic energy so precisely. She remembers when her father refused to even touch the holy sword. Even the strongest family members could only handle it for a short time. To use it properly, someone has to keep changing their dark energy into wavelengths the holy sword cannot detect, over and over without ever stopping. Even the clan leader believed that the only beings capable of doing that during a Fight would be a Gehenna demon, a demon dragon, or some lunatic who handles demonic energy as naturally as breathing. Thinking about that, Mary smiles. Maybe her father's long-held dream is finally going to come true. In the kitchen, a terrifying demon cuts a fresh strawberry in half with a slash across. The counter then places it onto a heart-shaped cake. Chris watches in absolute horror because, get this, the strawberry cake he ate earlier was made by those exact scary hands. Mary calmly assures him that the demon's baking skills are actually top tier, no matter how terrifying he looks. The chef notices Chris and asks why he came into the kitchen. Chris says he is there to bake cookies because he wants to give them to someone special. Mary gets immediately worried and asks if he is planning to give cookies to another woman. But Chris quickly says it is not like that at all. The chef tells him he can bake the cookies instead, but Chris says the most important thing right now is that he has to make them with his own hands. He even brags that he is actually pretty good at baking, but right at that moment, something bright red splashes right onto his face. Relax, it is strawberry juice, not blood, but Chris still ends up asking if there is blood mixed into that juice too. At that, Mary just gives a cheerful little laugh that is somehow way worse than any answer. Chris catches Mary just before she is about to leave. He says he came to see her off and presents the sweet gift he prepared for her. When she opens the box, she finds beautiful cookies inside, and her eyes immediately light up with joy. Count Khazar finally realizes why Chris asked about her favorite food the day before, and he thinks his son really knows how to win people over. Chris urges her to try them right there, telling her he made them himself. Mary takes a bite, and her expression brightens right away. She praises Chris and asks if there is anything he wants as a reward. This is the exact moment he was waiting for, so he asks her to officially be his aunt. Mary gets it right away. He is not asking to use that title. They are blood relatives after all. She heard some news from her brother. Her brother said Chris wants to take part in the Star Black ceremony. That means he is actually asking her to take his side in this dangerous succession war. Mary refuses. The elders of the main house must stay absolutely neutral among heirs. Chris just smiles. He claims it was a sincere request to get closer to her. Nothing more, just a sweet nephew trying to bond with his beloved aunt. Mary asks if he truly has no hidden motive, and that is when Chris plays his hand. If she happens to cherish him enough to support him on her own, he cannot refuse. He even looks at her with those big, sparkling, innocent eyes, and honestly, it actually works. Mary laughs, saying if her nephew makes such delicious cookies, she has to cherish him. Chris beams with absolute pride. Beside them, Count Khazar is practically moved to tears. Mary asks if she will get to taste these incredible treats again. But Chris shrugs. If she disappoints him, he might just get moody. And then the next batch might not taste as good. Mary smiles at his bold cheekiness. Amused, she suddenly invites him to join the elite Black Shadow Knights instead. His incredible performance during the duel with Melon genuinely impressed her. He might even surpass the Grandmaster, but his rivals are dangerous. She worries his talent could be cut short before it ever gets to bloom. Chris just laughs it off. If he cannot overcome a simple hurdle like that, dying is fine. He appreciates the warning, but he has absolutely no intention of losing to anyone. Mary can only smile at his absurd confidence. In the end, he is a mage. And she knows she has absolutely no right to block the path he chooses to walk. But before she leaves, she offers him one very crucial piece of advice. Watch out for the first princess. Even Count Khazar is completely baffled by this. Why warn him about Princess Julian instead of someone dangerous like Ashid? Especially when Julian is famously known as the gentlest sibling of them all. Mary simply tells them that they will understand the real reason very soon. Chris thanks her for the warning, and then she takes her leave. He drops onto his bed, mind racing. Both his father and his aunt achieved rank 6, yet during the Great War he heard almost nothing about what they actually did. Just how many monsters does this magic empire really have? Monsters strong enough to utterly crush the forces of light, but even so, he refuses to let that dark future repeat itself. He must grow stronger. And he needs to do it fast. 1 month later, his father calls him in. Count Khazar says there is something very important he needs to discuss with his son. But the moment Chris steps inside, the Count is left utterly speechless. The boy has already reached the 2nd rank. It is completely unbelievable. Reaching the second rank in just 1 month, Chris acts like it is nothing. He casually asks why he was summoned so late. His father sighs heavily. Word finally came from the main house. He submitted both Chris and Turn as official candidates for the Holy Dark ceremony, but only Turn was approved. Their excuse: they claim Chris wasted family wealth, chased women, and got drunk. He broke valuables and even resorted to theft. Pure lies, but a massive blow. That truth hits Chris right in his pride. Even so, his father is still completely furious. He cannot stand his son being judged like that. Recovering his composure, Chris looks up. He asks if this decision came straight from Marquis Langham. Count Khazar answers. The Marquis stayed quiet, already knowing that Ashid was the one pulling the strings. Yet both of them strongly suspect that the real underlying issue here is Rion de Baron. He is the pride of the main house and the star of the Holy Dark ceremony. In this ritual, candidates must share the pure darkness extracted from the shadow. But with only a limited amount available, things quickly turn ugly. The candidates fight in a literal death match. Honestly, talk about a brutal family reunion. Naturally, this means the higher-ranked candidates take the biggest share. That darkness is the key factor in deciding who becomes the next heir. If Rion wins and claims most darkness to become the new sixth prince, then Chris's ultimate goal will become a lot harder to actually reach. Count Khazar tells him not to worry, he will speak with them again. If that fails, he plans to ask Mary for help. Chris says he can handle it himself. His father disagrees, saying that even though Chris is incredibly talented, he tells Chris that it is completely fine to leave things to the adults this time around. Those words actually reach Chris, who truly appreciates hearing them, but a scoundrel always has his own ways of solving problems. He asks a crucial question. Is anyone from Count Tyraman's family actually taking part in the ceremony? Turns out the Count's third son is joining, which makes Khazar absolutely furious again. He remembers that Count Tyraman was also leading the charge to ban Chris. The man pushed hard to disqualify Chris, even though he is just a complete lowlife. He only knows how to train weak beastlings like a common circus act. Chris realizes his father is surprisingly doting. Honestly, it is pretty wholesome. He tells his father to calm down, promising to prove everyone dead wrong about his worth. Chris knows that Count Tyraman hosts the Ebony Hunt around this time. Because of this, he decides that he will join that dangerous hunt as a lowly drive man. Meanwhile, back at the Dark Castle, Mary reports directly to the old patriarch. She has just returned from observing Chris as ordered, and her report is highly unexpected. She claims Chris is on a completely different level, but he doubts it. The boy he remembers was just a conceited fool playing at being genius. Mary insists that Chris is different now. The old patriarch asks one thing. He only cares about one question: can this boy fulfill his ultimate wish? That wish is to reverse fate itself and deny death using forbidden magic. This impossible dream is the only reason the old patriarch clings to life. Mary cannot guarantee anything, but she believes Chris might be his best shot. He is the closest thing to that wish. This catches the old man's interest. He wants to keep watching. Still, he knows Chris is banned from participating. The boy will not be allowed inside the Holy Dark ceremony. Mary confirms the family consensus is against him, asking if the patriarch will intervene. The old man flatly refuses. He believes if Chris is truly a beast, this won't break him. Mary argues that even a young beast needs a proper chance to grow. But the old patriarch silences her instantly with a single heavy look of authority. She knows there is no changing his mind. That is just who he is. That is his style. Higher expectations just make him harsher. He then remarks that Mary must have grown pretty fond of the kid if she is speaking up like this. Right after that, he calls for the bloodsucker. Something emerges from the shadows, stepping forward as Simon, the head steward of the Dark Maid. Glan. Simon already knows the deal, understanding that his job is to keep watch over Chris until the Holy Dark ceremony. Still, he asks for permission to play a tiny prank on him. The patriarch warns him not to push too far. And Simon looks pretty pleased before slipping back into the dark. At this point, Mary can only hope Chris survives. Meanwhile, Chris is riding in a carriage, planning his next move. He reached rank 2 incredibly fast thanks to raw talent, but stamina and mana reserves still take plenty of training. Rank 3, still way too far for him right now. That is why he needs ebony, which can boost his magic in no time at all. Of time, luckily Count Tyramon's annoying third son went out of his way to provoke him right when their family happened to be hosting the ebony hunt. The catch is that simply catching the beast Carazo won't actually get him the ebony. A highly specific secret condition must be fully met first. The moment the carriage stops, Grantle comes running out to greet him. Chris immediately asks if he came empty-handed, and Grantle quickly presents the money he gathered. Chris slaps it away instantly, telling him that this sad excuse for a tribute won't cut it. Then he starts pressing him over all the dirty underground deals and unpaid taxes tied to his gambling den. He orders Grantle to sweep up every single one of those messes, then demands he bring him a gray pill as well. Shaking, Grantle explains that those pills are only sold on the black market and the price has gone way up lately. Chris, however, has Mary standing right beside him, sweetly mentioning that brutal torture is her absolute specialty. That is more than enough to make Grantle cooperate. Chris likes that response and orders him to secure a razor-sharp dagger and high-grade armor. 2. Once Chris leaves, Grantle collapses to his knees, cursing. Talk about getting turned into a basic full-time errand boy against his will. Mary asks if they are going back to the estate now, but Chris says there is still one more place to visit. He tells the coachman to stop at an alchemist shop. Inside, he looks around and asks for a bright pink potion, an aphrodisiac apparently, but Chris says he has a use for it. Mary stares at the pink bottle in confusion. While Chris starts sweating like crazy, she finally asks if he has some kind of problem, but Chris immediately denies it, claiming he needs it for something else. Mary then asks if it is for the Count, and Chris quickly agrees, saying his father is getting older, so someone has to look after him. He even warns the shop owner that this must remain an absolute secret for the sake of the Count's honor. A shameless save, sure, but at least it lands. Later, Count Khazar in turn arrive to bid him farewell. Chris quickly reminds his little brother to use the embarrassing title he promised. Shaking, Turn calls him Most Honorable King Emperor Majesty Big Bro, telling him to stay safe because the ebony beast hunts are highly lethal. Chris just laughs, teasing his little brother. But Turn shrugs it off. He would be pretty bummed out to miss a real duel with him. Count Khazar steps in to end the bickering before wishing Chris the best of luck. Later, he asks Turn about his weird new nickname, but Turn completely refuses to explain. When Chris finally reaches the Tyramon estate, a demon blocks him right at the gate. The guard bluntly tells him he cannot enter. Naturally, his own crew starts arguing back. But the demon claims he is just following orders straight from Alrose himself. Chris gives him a freezing glare and asks if he should just find another place. The demon smugly nods, so Chris tells his furious servants to drop the argument. He maintains his cool, telling his people that everything is actually perfectly fine. Since he is locked out, the Tyramon family can just cover his hotel bill instead. That leads him straight to a ridiculously fancy estate that costs a fortune. It is 100,000 rup, and Chris gladly takes full advantage of their wallet. Since burning someone else's cash is rare, Chris orders his servants to start unpacking. But before they can even untie a single strap, a massive suitcase bursts open. Mary literally pops out of the baggage like some kind of surprise delivery. She cheerfully praises the fancy place while Chris just stares in absolute disbelief. She admits she hitched a ride because she is the maid bound to him forever. Chris is completely speechless. Honestly, how do you even respond to that? Mary just giggles, teasingly telling him that his flustered face is super cute. Before Chris can even process this, Alrose, the family's third son, suddenly barges in. He is clutching the massive bill, and Chris casually hails him as the hunt's star. Chris explains he did exactly what they asked by finding his own quarters. Obviously, a proud noble like him cannot sleep in some cheap garbage motel. So he just bought a whole estate instead, completely twisting the knife. He asks if the great Tyramon family is too broke to cover the bill. The petty taunt lands perfectly. Enraged, Alrose immediately summons a massive beast. He unleashes a terrifying black panther, asking Chris if he has a death wish. Chris calmly analyzes their special beast control magic right then and there. Unlike the taming methods of the Alliance, this is pure dark magic. It brutally forces beasts into submission using sheer fear and absolute domination. It even injects dread and confusion to completely dull the creature's instincts. Still, Chris can tell this dark magic is much trickier than he expected. This is definitely not the kind of power you can master overnight. Not that he wants to learn it, he just wants to beat it up. He asks Mary for a solid weapon to handle this very scary kitty. She tosses him a basic wooden pole, and Chris immediately goads his opponent. He dares him to unleash it. The Black Panther lunges forward, but Chris jams the wooden pole into its jaws. Yet the cat is surprisingly strong, throwing him straight to the dirt. Chris chuckles, admitting that this 2-on-1 fight feels a little cheap. So if he wins, he gets to join the hunt as an official bodyguard. Alrose scoffs at the bold claim and commands his panther to strike again. But in a flash, Chris completely vanishes, slipping right behind his enemy. Chris starts mercilessly thumping Alrose on the head with his wooden pole. He laughs, telling him there is absolutely no crying allowed in this duel. Before the beast can even react, Chris looms ahead like a reaper, freezing it solid. Alrose is utterly shocked that anyone could lay a finger on his beast, but Chris quickly points out it was nothing but a cheap second-rank illusion spell. Furious, Alrose immediately tries to summon another beast, but Chris cracks him over the head with his pole, telling the punk that nobody is going to wait around for transformations or casting times. Just like that, Chris is back to gambling. Though he prefers to call it a well-earned rest, to him a total scoundrel. Acting like a scoundrel is just another Tuesday. Even Marie is somehow on board with his routine, though she still absolutely refuses to serve him any real alcohol, giving him ginger ale instead. Chris is suffering internally because he desperately wants some booze but only gets soda, truly tragic. Meanwhile, the two demons assigned to watch him have absolutely no clue why they were ordered to keep an eye on this guy. Chris casually invites them to join the card games, pointing out their master already got trashed and will not be waking up until tomorrow anyway. They flatly refuse, so Chris just tells them to sit back and enjoy the show. Hours fly by from dusk into late night, and eventually the demon pair find Chris slumped over the table, looking completely and utterly wasted. They decide he is not even worth their time anymore, slipping away to go file their report and call it a night. But the second they leave, Chris instantly snaps awake. He peeks out the window to make sure they are gone and decides it is time to head out on his own. Marie hates the fact that he is leaving solo with that potent aphrodisiac in his bag, and she finally realizes it was never meant for the Count. Now she is just disappointed that she will not be serving him in bed tonight, though she still vows to support his bonehead nightly efforts. Chris snaps and tells her to stop. Like that, reminding her this story is supposed to be clean for all ages. Honestly, she cannot say a single normal sentence without making it completely weird. Anyway, Chris heads off to the Kython Mountains, the secret territory of House Tyramen. The place is packed with demonic beasts, but he sneaks around until he finds the hunting grounds, relieved to see only 2 guards keeping watch. Lucky for him, Marie taught him invisibility magic, even if her original motive was assuming he wanted to peep on girls. Using the invisibility spell, Chris slips right past the guards and enters the restricted hunting area without a sound. Before long, he reaches the altar where the hunt is supposed to peak. Just like the rumors said, this place is creepy as hell. He recalls his friend's explanation: to obtain darkness, one must make Corazzo choose death. The beast must be driven into such extreme fear that dying actually feels preferable. Just like opposites can meet, absolute terror and ecstatic joy are separated by a very thin line. In that brief, fleeting moment, worthless ashen transforms into darkness. That is exactly why House Tyramen dominates these hunts, using raw fear to control the beasts. Chris had planned to steal their secret technique, then use a special blend of aphrodisiacs to drive Corazzo wild and steal all the darkness himself. But there is simply no time to steal and master their method now. With the hunt starting soon, he needs to find another way, and fast. He suddenly feels a massive wave of dark energy surging behind him, but when he spins around, nobody is there. He immediately heads straight toward where that creepy presence originated, eventually arriving at a hidden cave completely overflowing with pure malice. Worse, there is a heavy, high-level dark barrier sealed tight around it. That tells him exactly. This creepy place is a direct rift to Gehenna. It is a chaotic underworld of demons and vicious fiends. Apparently a portal linking it to the human world sits right here. Chris immediately cooks up a plan, since he already holds the perfect bait he can Drag Corazzo here instead. Suddenly, he gets incredibly excited for the hunt and slips away, completely unaware that someone has been watching him the entire time. A red bat morphs, revealing Simon. Simon finds Chris way more intriguing than he initially expected. The kid did not just trash that Tyraman brat. He also played dumb long enough to lower his observer's guard entirely. Then he snuck straight into a forbidden area to pull off some secret scheme. That just makes Simon want to mess with him even more. He faces the rift, thrusts his hand inside, and blood starts dripping from his fingers onto the dirt. The blood dissolves into black vapor before a hollow voice asks what he seeks. Meanwhile, a group of young hunters arrives at the grounds with Al Ross in the lead. Chris wastes zero time mocking his tough guy act. After all, Al Ross got wrecked earlier. Al Ross snaps right back, calling him an absolute poser for dragging Bruno along. When he cannot even handle it right, Chris chuckles it still beats a wooden pole and asks if Al Ross wants to test that theory. Al Ross has had more than enough trauma from this guy. Ignoring the obvious bait, he orders his crew to start moving and lure Corazzo toward the stone altar. Chris spots that red bat, but decides to stay quiet about it for now. Al Ross demands some kind of answer from him, so Chris gives him a completely lazy response. Then the deer man carrying the flag snaps at Chris to sit back on the sidelines so he does not get in there way. Classic Chris. He provokes him immediately, making the deer man get furious, but Al Ross cuts him off, telling him to save his energy for the upcoming hunt. Instead, Al Ross orders Chris to guard the flag, and Chris happily agrees, promising to watch it like a proper scoundrel. For now, he just wants to watch how they manage on their own. Honestly, it does not matter anyway because everything is already moving according to his design. He has that wooden dagger from Grantle, which will surely be useful soon. Before long, Corazzo, a class 4 demon beast, is lured right to the altar. Chris feels weirdly uncomfortable over how incredibly cute the beast looks. Then Al Ross steps forward for the binding ritual and begins casting, but the moment Corazzo catches the scent of that pink potion spilled across the ground, it goes completely berserk. Al Ross is frozen in pure shock, and before he can recover, Corazzo slaps him right in the face, sending him crashing. The beast immediately starts unleashing deadly poison, prompting the mages to quickly erect a barrier. Chris already knows that will not save them because the beast is completely driven wild by the aphrodisiac. Al Ross downs an antidote, realizing they are in deep trouble if this keeps dragging on. His guards step in to subdue the raging creature, only to get instantly blown away instead. Then Corazzo charges straight at Al Ross, and right before the strike connects, Chris blocks the incoming attack. Even then, Chris strikes a deal. He only helps if Al Ross calls him Big Brother. Al Ross hates the idea, but Chris reminds him he cannot be picky. Left with no choices, Al Ross grits his teeth and asks for help. Chris tells him to remember that promise, then leaps into action. He casts a binding spell on Corazzo. Al Ross is utterly shocked. He did not know Chris used binding magic, but Chris mocks his arrogance. Did he seriously think he was the only master? It is not some secret. It is just standard magic. Chris is pure, unadulterated disrespect. As the binding locks, Chris vaults onto the beast, steering it forward. Al Ross screams a frantic warning about the rift of Gehenna ahead. But Chris knows his destination. He rides Corazzo straight into the cavern. The terrified beast begins to tremble. Chris tells it to fear all it wants. The moment Corazzo's eyes flare with bright light, Chris draws his weapon. He slashes with his dagger. Al Ross finally catches up to the cave entrance. He screams for Chris to retreat immediately. This area is way too dangerous. Chris ignores the panic, staring at the glowing orb. He asks what they should do. Because this is not simple darkness, it is ashen. Al Ross freezes, speechless. His guards instantly point fingers, blaming Chris for the entire mess. They claim he lured the beast here on purpose, but Al Ross silences them. He commands them to stop and actually thanks Chris for saving his squad. That sincere gratitude gives Chris a slight pang of guilt. He caused this situation. He even swapped out the darkness, but since he is here, he must finish it. Naturally, that means it is time to collect his payment. He demands the title. Call me Big Brother, he insists. Al Ross argues he never agreed to that. Besides, he is 2 years older. Their petty bickering is instantly cut short. A heavy aura floods the cavern, crushing everyone down to the ground. The boys look up in sheer disbelief. A massive demon slowly steps out of the rift. It sneers that it has been ages since it last saw toys like them. They are facing a true demon of Gehenna. Even with trembling knees, Al Ross steps forward. He tells Chris to escape since he is an outsider, but Chris has other plans. Spotting a red bat clinging to the shadows, Chris flings his dagger with precision. The bat vanishes. Miles away, Simon suddenly loses his magical connection. He has no clue how Chris spotted him. He wanted to recall the demon later. But with his teleport scout destroyed, he cannot easily intervene now. A moment too late and they are all dead. Panic setting in, Simon rushes desperately toward the rift of Gehenna. Back in the cave, the demon mockingly asks what that strike was for. Chris mutters he just hates spectators. The fiend chuckles at his bravado. It tells him he has far bigger worries right now since death is staring him down. Judging by the monsters Chris faced in his past life, this is bad news. Even a low-tier demon here must be at least 5-star in power. At his current rank, he has absolutely zero chance of winning this fight. But Chris never backs down from a losing battle. He unleashes a spell. He puts the guards to sleep, but Al Ross resists, snapping at him. "Stop wasting mana," he yells. Chris sighs at his stubbornness. Magic resistance, knocking him out by brute force instead. The demon assumes Chris is sacrificing his own allies and offers a deal. It promises to spare his life and personally bless him if he hands the others over as tributes. Chris tells him he talks way too much. He has one rule: never mess with his own side. Chris draws Gruna, but the demon mockingly laughs and says, wielding a sacred sword he cannot even use as a joke, it attacks with dark energy, leaving Chris absolutely covered in blood before grabbing him by the throat. It offers one final chance to betray his friends and survive, but Chris spits straight in its face. He can use this sacred sword just fine. He breaks free, landing heavily on the ground, and raises Gruna. He pours the power of pure light into the blade. The demon is shocked. A demon wielding light. Wait for it, Chris mockingly asks if he is finally starting to panic. That only makes the demon angrier, triggering an even more devastating blast than before. But this time Chris is ready. He unleashes the Dead Sea Flash, and it is so overwhelming it completely swallows the incoming blast and erases the entire demon. Chris cannot even celebrate. He has zero energy left because his body still cannot handle that level of power. He collapses onto the ground as an old memory flashes back. The hero had once been stunned when Chris copied the Dead Sea Flash after seeing it just once. He explained the technique was like a single line of light slicing across the Dead Sea. The hero admitted that even after using it, he still was not worthy of the light of House Mayor, but Chris, he believed, might actually be the light that saves the world. Meanwhile, the first seed of the 7 circles of Gehenna, Mefina, becomes fascinated by Chris. She decides to watch his path with great interest. 2 days later, Chris finally wakes up at the Tyramen estate. He thinks the entire recovery period was a waste. At least his body feels fine and the darkness is still right where he left it. He thinks of Mefina and realizes he might have attracted some incredibly annoying attention. Talented young demons usually receive blessings from high-ranking devils to help them grow faster, but Chris does not care about that at all. To him, those kinds of cheap power-ups are only for people who cannot grow on their own. Besides, if Mefina is only from the 7 circles, she cannot be all that impressive anyway. This guy is hilariously disrespectful, even toward nightmare-level beings. A knock comes at the door and Count Tyramen enters with his son Al Ross. Chris tries to get up to greet them, but the Count tells him to stay put and listen. He explains they sent a survey team to investigate the cave the day before. They discovered that someone had actively tampered with the magic circle sealing the gate to Gehenna. They believe the demon was reverse summoned mid-manifestation, though even in that short window of time, it easily could have wiped everyone out. Chris stays quiet because he knows nobody would believe he erased the monster himself. Count Tyraman then sighs, admitting he owes Chris a massive apology. He believed the rumors, thinking Chris was just a useless scoundrel, but not only does he thank Chris now, he calls him a benefactor to their entire house. Tyraman, Chris shrugs, it was simply his duty as a member. They are family after all, but inwardly deep guilt gnaws at him. He wrecked their estate, Count Tyreman quietens down, repeating that single word. Family, speak openly, the Count urges. Ask for anything in return. Chris has one request. He wants House Tyreman to bury the hatchet. Reconcile with House Khazar, stop acting like enemies, it is time. They should be rivals, pushing each other to grow through fair play. Besides, the hostility was never real, it was fueled by the main family. They hate seeing branch families unite, unity is a threat to them. Count Tyreman goes pale. Is he suggesting a rebellion against the main house? Chris shakes his head, no, but they can stop playing like pawns. The Count is deeply impressed. He agrees to contact Khazar about it. It is a solid win. Chris knows that gathering these allies is crucial. When the Age of Ruin returns, they will finally have a strong front line. Tyreman claps Al Rose on the back, reminds him to hand over the gift. Al Rose hesitates, reaching into his cloak to pull out the ashen orb. He mutters a lame excuse about finding it lying around when he woke up. Chris teases him instantly, making the Count burst into loud, hearty laughter. Then the Count offers his own reward, a rare Tier 4 summoning stone. He also promises to endorse Chris's attendance at the Holy Dark ceremony. Chris thanks him for the heavy support and they finally head out. But once they reach the quiet hallway, Chris stops. He senses something. Come out, Chris says. Simon slowly emerges from the cold shadows. Simon is stunned. Their first encounter was never a fluke, not luck. Even Count Tyreman failed to notice his cloak, yet Chris did instantly. Chris smiles casually. He simply caught the faint scent of blood. Simon introduces himself as chief steward of the Dark Mage clan. Dangerous. Chris knows he is one of the leader's top guys. Then recognition. Now here is the kicker. Chris finally realizes exactly who he is dealing with. Simon is the master of the Blood Shadow Corps, a terrifying group. Completely insane killers. They massacred anyone standing in their path. Both the Magic Empire and Light faction feared them. Their leader was a monster who reached 8 stars, eventually breaking into 9 stars by the end. He became the 10th Demon King. Chris nearly died facing that monster. Way too many close calls to count, and Simon is that demon's blood son. Simon cuts in. He never expected Khazar's young lord to be this refined. A true gentleman, capable of completely wiping out an entire demon. Chris freezes inside. Did Simon actually witness him use the Dead Sea Flash? He plays completely dumb, pretending he has absolutely no idea what Simon means. Simon is not buying it. There was no trace of the demon. Absolutely nothing left in the cave. This was not a reverse summoning. It was total erasure. Even Simon admits he is highly impressed. He demands to know how Chris did it. He needs the report. Chris refuses instantly, even if it is for the clan leader. He has zero interest in handing over his private combat secrets. Secrets just because someone asked nicely. In fact, he doubts the clan. Leader would want some fool who gives up his claws so easily. A real boss appreciates a beast keeping those claws hidden until the end. Simon finds that pretty amusing, but then Chris demands an apology from him. Under normal circumstances, absolutely nobody can tell the difference between reverse summoning and total erasure just by looking at the aftermath. Count Tyreman assumed the beast was just sent back, but Simon knew better. He knew it was erased because he summoned that Gehenna beast first. A massive summoning incident that almost killed a noble family looks bad. It would look terrible to the leader of the Dark Mage clan. Simon owns up to it, but Chris tells him to skip the formalities. He plans to keep this completely quiet, which means Simon owes him big. Simon likes this deal and promises he won't forget the mercy shown. With a quick salute, Simon vanishes. Now Chris knows this guy will play a huge role in the coming Age of Ruin, meaning a connection. Right now is a massive advantage, and Chris knows exactly what he's doing. Soon, Chris and Marie are fully packed and ready to leave when Al Rose drops by. Right away, Chris reminds him that he needs to start calling him Big Brother. Al Rose complains that he is actually 2 years older, but after some bickering, he finally gets down to business. He tells Chris that the one fighting hardest against him joining the Holy Dark ceremony is a guy named Rion. Even though they are both second rank, the main house and branch families are not even close to the same level, which makes perfect sense. When the main family gets the top elixirs, incredible vision and deep blessings of dark magic, compared to them, Chris is just easy prey. Chris just smiles and gives his new little brother a warning in return. He tells Al Rose to stay far away from the holy dark ceremony. Al Rose gets pissed. He was trying to help, but now Chris is acting like he wants to hog all the dark magic himself. Chris calmly replies that whoever steps up to face him is going to regret it. Al Rose fumes at the arrogance, but Chris just walks away. After returning to Count Khazar's estate, Tern hears some interesting news. The moment Chris returned, he went straight to the training hall. Tern rushes over there and catches him just in time, shouting out his brother's ridiculous title. He demands the duel they promised. Chris spots that Tern has already climbed to second rank middle. Still, he tells him to go practice alone. Then it suddenly hits Chris that Tern is also entering that holy dark ceremony, which complicates things. Chris finally agrees they can fight after they both finish their training. Tern warns him this time is different, and man, he looks serious. Seeing that stubborn look, Chris is reminded of someone exactly like him. Later, Chris sits quietly on his bed with the darkness orb in hand. Only 2 weeks remain before the holy dark ceremony, so he must act. He swallows it down. The brutal impact hits him instantly like a truck. He collapses as waves of dark energy pour deep into his body for 15 days. Later on, Tern comes over to bother Chris, stepping inside only after getting permission. The instant Tern lays eyes on him, he is completely shocked by his brother's massive improvement. It has only been 15 days. Chris warns that he will win but still accepts the challenge. Tern wanted a fight and he gets it, but Chris has one major condition. Give up your spot in the holy dark ceremony. Tern freezes, completely stunned. Chris is ruthless. The ceremony is a battlefield and weaklings must step aside. That insult pushes Tern over the edge. Shut up, he snaps. Draw your sword. Chris just sighs at his stubborn little brother. Since words fail, Chris decides he will have to beat the lesson into him. Tern charges in blindly, but the clash ends quickly with the boy absolutely wrecked. He ends up stuck in bed. Count Khazar warns Chris that he went too far. The healer ordered at least 15 days of bed rest, ruining Tern's immediate plans. Missing the holy dark ceremony is a massive blow, and Tern immediately protests. Chris calmly asks their father to leave them so they can talk things through. Count Khazar steps out, telling the brothers to settle this mess on their own. Chris wastes no time pointing out that Tern is acting incredibly petty right now. He acts just like the Alliance weaklings, completely forgetting he picked this fight. Tern is too angry for logic. He yells that Chris just hates seeing him succeed. He accuses his older brother of constantly mocking and undermining his hard work. He claims Chris broke him on purpose just to keep him out of the ceremony. Right now, the frustrated kid is truly one sentence away from a complete emotional breakdown. You can feel the raw tension as Chris realizes they have a massive misunderstanding. He looks at Tern, explaining he only wants him to grow strong alongside him. But entering the holy dark ceremony now will actually ruin his biggest opportunity. If they clash there, Tern will completely lose his shot at acquiring the dark demon. Besides, that particular power does not even suit his brother's natural fighting style. Tern actually needs the Ashen Demon. It turns out demonic power branches out too. While the dark demon sits at the very top, others hold different specialties. Beneath it lies the Ashen Demon, which is highly specialized in powerful black magic. Curse magic is far easier to learn than complex swordsmanship. Tern is stunned, asking how Chris could possibly know all this hidden information. Chris cannot exactly reveal his knowledge comes from the future he already lived. Instead, he lies, saying he realized it during their intense duel. He warns that rushing to grab the higher power will block Tern's true path. Snatching the dark demon first makes mastering the Ashen Demon nearly impossible later on. It can technically be done, but the side effects are just too risky. The overwhelming influence of the dark attribute would completely reshape Tern's magical core. For an impatient kid wanting quick power, that would become pure poison. Chris urges him to think very carefully about this life-changing choice. It is genuine advice from a brother who truly wants to see him succeed. He then pulls out a rare healing orb and hands it over as a gift. Since Tern is his annoying little brother, he claims he had to help out. Little does Tern know, Chris already kept the absolute best treasure for himself. Tears well up in Tern's eyes as he is deeply moved by this gesture. But then he asks why Chris was such a cruel jerk before their mother passed. Especially after everything she went through because of him, Chris simply watches the man sob. He steps closer, quietly admitting he understood absolutely nothing back then. Then the scene shifts. Chris reaches the central family palace, only to find the massive gates tightly closed. He finds their extreme territorial pride incredibly petty. Once he seizes control of the clan, he vows to rewrite this rule entirely. But before he can lose himself in that daydream, Marie breaks his train of thought. She teasingly claims her heart is racing since they are finally out on a private date. Chris dryly points out she has no heart to beat. Still, she is right about one thing. The main household strictly limited each candidate to just one accompanying partner. Thanks to their binding loyalty oath, Marie was the only companion permitted at his side. Chris spots the crowd whispering, though Marie just laughs it off. She thinks he is famous, but honestly the truth is way more shocking. They cannot believe Simon personally came down to meet him. Simon examines the young master. He instantly senses that Chris achieved a major breakthrough in just 2 weeks. Chris asks if serving the clan patriarch is really such an easy, carefree job. He wonders how Simon has so much free time to just stand around. Simon smiles. He reveals he came strictly on the leader's direct command. The sovereign wants a meeting. Chris remains completely unfazed, which is exactly the calm response Simon anticipated. Chris sarcastically claims he is deeply shocked, delivering a highly believable performance. Before long, Chris and Simon make their way into the grand throne room. There, the absolute ruler of the dark magic clan, Lord Noga, awaits them. The old patriarch greets Chris, with Mary standing right beside him. The crushing aura radiating off him is so intense Chris can barely stand. Talk about a terrifying welcome, the patriarch is testing him with pure dark energy. A typical warrior of his rank would collapse instantly, yet Chris resists. Forcing his shaking muscles to lock, he calmly greets the clan sovereign. The sovereign asks if he is shocked by this sudden, unannounced audience. But Chris says he expected this meeting, since a new star has finally appeared. Lord Noga chuckles, noting that neither Mary nor Simon spared any praise. Even so, the sovereign remains completely undecided about the boy's true potential. A brilliant seed is entirely meaningless unless it can actually survive the elements. He might easily wither and die the very moment he breaks the surface. Chris agrees with the harsh logic, admitting his current strength is still lacking. He acknowledges he is currently far from worthy of the old ruler's trust. But time will prove whether this little sapling will shatter every expectation. Perhaps he will grow into a massive, towering entity or something far stranger. An abnormal existence that completely eclipses the grandest trees of this world. At the absolute minimum, he promises never to disappoint the patriarch. Amused, the old ruler says he will watch him closely, then dismisses him. Once the young master departs, Mary asks for the sovereign's final verdict. Lord Noga admits Chris surpassed his initial hopes, but predicts a turbulent destiny. Great talent breeds chaotic storms, and a bloody wind is already approaching. Violent chaos is heading straight for the Empire, but a small hope has emerged. He believes Chris might actually be the one to fulfill his long-held wish. Meanwhile, on the very eve of the sacred dark ceremony, Chris steps forward. The venue opens with a grand introduction. Nearby, several women whisper, unable to comprehend why the clan leader summoned a gigolo like him, but Chris ignores the gossip. To him, the answer is incredibly simple: he is just way too handsome. His eyes lock onto the alcohol, instantly interested, but servant quickly reminds him he is underage and hands him a ginger ale. Instead, Chris is spiritually devastated. Once again, a man's ultimate enemy is not fate, it is ginger ale. Soon the royal family is announced, making their grand entrance. Ashid, Julian, Jupian, and Mysak walk into the venue in a straight line. Chris notices the first prince is completely missing, but Ashid really bothers him. He wonders what the guy who trashed his reputation and got caught up in Chris's scheme will say. Now, but Ashid walks right past him without even looking. Chris gets annoyed by that cold shoulder, but his focus soon shifts to the first Princess Julian as she glides past him. He remembers Mary warning him to be extremely careful around her, but right now he cannot sense anything out of the ordinary, so he files that thought away for later. After being ignored by all the VIPs, he nearly jumps when an old man suddenly sneaks up behind him. The stranger introduces himself as Fael, a summoner serving Rion. he claims an unworthy weakling is going to participate in tomorrow's holy dark ceremony, worrying that an unqualified candidate might cause an accident staining the reputation of their great dark clan. Chris does not appreciate being insulted by a nobody, but Fail tells him Chris just needs to prove him wrong. Chris spots Rian standing right behind Fail, thinking that if the coward has a real problem, he should step up himself. Instead of hiding behind an old man, still Chris can handle him. During tomorrow's ceremony, for now he accepts the sudden challenge and tells Fail to go ahead and show off his little tricks. Fail is utterly confused that Chris is ready to fight right here completely unarmed, but Chris says he needs no weapon to crush a nobody. Fail warns him he will regret this, but Chris knows the exact opposite is about to happen. Nearby, Julian watches the scene unfold with quiet amusement. The crowd gasps in horror as they watch the spirits beat Fail down while obeying Chris. No one can believe what they are seeing. Fail was the one who summoned those dark spirits, yet the moment Chris flicked his hand, watch this, they turned on their own summoner. Nobody can fathom how he snatched control so fast, but Chris acts like it is nothing. He says this sad trap obviously traces back to Rian and that the heir of the dark mage lineage should be ashamed of something so pathetic. Rian flushes red when Chris calls him out directly, but Chris keeps pressing. He tells him if he has a real problem, then he should challenge him face to face instead of hiding behind others. Rian refuses to admit any connection to the challenge, but Chris tells him that lie is incredibly pathetic and nobody is buying it. Even so, he decides to humor him. This once, clearly this cowardly brat needs someone to beat some actual manners into him. The next day, the candidates gather for the holy dark ceremony. Chris is incredibly relaxed, openly yawning without a single care. Alrose asks if he is seriously not nervous after the absolute mess he caused yesterday. Chris is just surprised Alrose even showed up, but Alrose shrugs it off. He says this holy dark ceremony cannot be delayed. That is when Rian approaches. Chris glares, still annoyed enough to plan a proper payback for him later on. But first, business. A tiny man suddenly steps forward out of nowhere. He introduces himself as Sebastian, the assistant butler running the main estate. Sebastian offers to lead them straight to the sacred grounds of the ceremony. He slams his staff hard against the dirt, and a hidden path opens. The others assume it is just a simple, dark basement passage. But Chris knows better. He recognizes a powerful illusion shifting the space. Sebastian starts heading down, moving with impossible, blinding speed. The candidates have to sprint at full speed just to stay close. Minutes stretch on. Soon the entire group is drenched in heavy sweat. They gasp for air, realizing this steep slope makes absolutely no sense. Yet Sebastian just smiles, completely relaxed while the others slowly break down. He tells them to hurry because the floor is about to give out. Right on cue, the stone shatters and several candidates plunge into darkness. While the survivors panic, Sebastian coldly complains they are falling behind schedule. He runs even faster, leaving the terrified group struggling in his wake. Seconds later, two more slide off the edge and vanish forever. Rian scoffs, thinking the weak deserve death, until he glances behind him. Chris is keeping pace effortlessly, not a single drop of sweat on him. Chris mocks him, asking why a direct bloodline heir is gasping already. All those expensive family elixirs, and he still runs like a turtle. In truth, Chris thinks every single one of them is an idiot. They are exhausted because they are fighting the fake environment head-on. Brute forcing a path through an active illusion is just a waste. You just have to subtly alter the flow to save your energy. Up ahead, Sebastian notices the boy is barely even breathing hard. Finally, they stop. Alrose stares at him, completely dumbfounded by his stamina. Chris tells him he would be fine too if he stopped playing with beasts. Before they can argue, a strange blue light flares from a massive crystal. A haunting, spectral woman materializes out of the glowing mist. She calls herself Lehu, keeper of this sanctuary of absolute dark mana. This is where the raw, holy darkness of their world pools. She welcomes them, explaining they are here to claim a legendary power. The power of Anmial, the third-ranked demon lord of their history. She raises her hand, sending streams of cold light toward different gates. There is simply not enough energy here for everyone to get a piece. The monstrous beasts guarding each gate will decide who is actually worthy. Chris raises his hand, asking if this is just first come first served. When she confirms it, he asks what happens if competitors fight each other. She explains that they should not cross paths on their separate journeys. But if they do meet, she warns that violence is highly discouraged. Spending precious time on a petty clash will only doom them both. Wasteful fighting only ends up helping their competitors. Instead, they need to focus on staying alive. That is her final warning to them before they clock hits 0 and the 4 candidates charge straight into their gates. Sebastian looks over at Lehu, wanting to place a quick bet, but she disappears instantly. The small guy throws a tantrum, muttering that she is incredibly cold. Meanwhile, Rian storms through his gate without holding back. Barely even flinching when waves of monsters block his path, he slices right through them because they are only second-tier beasts, which is child play for a second-rank fighter like him, but he knows things are very different for Chris. See, every single path was supposed to share the exact same distance and dangers, but a sorcerer was bribed to summon much deadlier monsters only on Chris's track. Rian is completely sure the guy will get swarmed and meet a brutal end, and since ritual accidents are ignored, this dungeon is basically Chris's grave. Rian eventually makes it to the sacred gate, fully expecting to be first. But guess who is already chilling there? Chris tells him he almost died of pure boredom waiting for him. A speechless Rian demands to know how he moved so fast, but Chris just shrugs it off. Rian is so rattled that he slips up, blabbing that Chris's path should have been way harder. Talk about a major slip-up. That is all Chris needs to hear. He instantly connects the sabotage straight to Rian. Chris cracks his knuckles and says there is no need for manners now since they are all alone. Rian knows fighting is strictly banned during the sacred ritual, but he lunges anyway, fully determined to put an end to Chris right here. Chris dodges with ease while casually reading his opponent's style, close range martial arts, bursts of pure magic, and joint locks designed to disable. But Chris slips past every single strike, driving Rian absolutely insane. Spotting what looks like an open hand, Rian rushes in to seize it. But that supposed opening was a trap. Chris grabs his hand midair, pinning it behind his back, and tells him not to cry over a little pain. The agony is so intense that Rian instantly screams. Oh man, he folded the second Chris stopped playing nice. Moments later, Alrose finally shows up and finds Chris sitting comfortably next to 2 completely knocked out boys. Chris casually asks him if he wants to pass out peacefully or get beaten first. Alrose immediately gets into a fighting stance, sensing things have gone sideways. But his ultimate fate is no different from the rest of them. In 5 years, the massive war with the Alliance will break out. Before that happens, Chris must secure the Dark Demon. He cannot afford to lose even a tiny speck of sacred darkness, not even for someone he likes. With the area cleared, Chris unlocks the doorway to the sacred darkness. This legendary energy gives any fiend the chance to become a true Transcendent. The Elder Clan head, who supposedly absorbed 80% of this power, remains one of the absolute strongest entities among all demon monarchs. And the Dark Destroyer absorbed over 90%, becoming an unstoppable Demon King. Judging by those legends, Chris knows that if he absorbs 100% of this pure dark energy, he will surpass even the Demon Emperor. With that goal, he reaches out to claim the power he has always fought for. Elsewhere, a group of 3 sits together, completely unable to believe that every candidate besides Chris was wiped out. This whole thing is a total disaster, especially with Rian in critical condition. They even suspect Chris used a forbidden magic tool to do it, demanding a full investigation, but the 3rd princess shuts them down quickly. She says that is not necessary since Chris is never returning from the sacred ground anyway. He has been in there for 2 full days now with absolutely no sign of life. She is convinced the sacred darkness already crushed his body and ended him. Even the Elder Clan head had limits to how much dark energy he could take in. So they are certain Chris is dead, and not even a corpse will be left behind. Before leaving, she vows to kill him herself if he somehow returns. Ever since her father died in battle against the Alliance, she and Rian were taken in by their uncle, Viscount Langham. Her position in the clan is incredibly unstable, and now Rian has failed to claim the sacred darkness too, leaving them with no backing for the succession. She fully intends to make Chris pay for this humiliation, while servants gossip about how he surely died as punishment for not knowing his place. They mock how Marie is still waiting, whispering that she will likely meet his ghost soon. Hearing their gossip, Marie immediately warns them. Her heart might flutter while waiting, but she can still easily turn trash talkers into obedient ghosts under her control. Terrified, those servants scatter instantly, running for their lives as Marie sighs deeply. She wishes her master would return because keeping a maiden waiting is seriously uncool. Talk about brave for exactly 3 seconds. Meanwhile, Chris opens his eyes and finds himself trapped in a crushing void of endless, suffocating darkness. He estimates he is at 70%, admitting this is far tougher than expected. But there is no turning back now, he has to endure it. The real test starts once he hits 90%. If he pushes past his ultimate limit, his core will shatter and he will die. Right here, before the war even begins, then he remembers a dragon's heart. It has the absolute largest vessel for mana, if he can replicate that structure. For just a few minutes, he might actually contain all of this heavy darkness. But even that imitation is incredibly hard because Chris has hit his limit. Right when he contemplates giving up, a mysterious figure appears before him. She asks if he needs help, and Chris is stunned to see Mapana. He asks what she is doing here, and she explains that demon powers make communicating with the deep darkness second nature to her. She offers to help him this once, without asking for anything in return. Naturally, Chris does not trust her intentions for a single second. Mapana simply laughs, claiming she is acting on a total whim right now. She tells him to grab her hand and absorb the sacred darkness together. A week later, even Lord Noga admits Chris is likely no longer alive, since there has been absolutely no trace or sign of him. To choose such reckless greed, Simon reports that Viscount Langham, the acting head, agrees and wants the pathway to the sacred ground open soon. Lord Noga thinks the Viscount is testing him, so he asks Simon if he actually believes Chris is still alive. Simon replies that the odds are basically zero, but adds that Chris is a highly interesting kid. After thinking it over, Lord Noga orders the pathway to stay open for just one more day. Chris feels his heart breaking apart while Mapana begs him to take her hand before it is too late. Chris refuses. She calls him a fool, warning that mortals can never hold past a certain limit. Chris shouts back that she is forgetting they are literally in a world of concepts right now. Mapana is shocked when Chris begins glowing, undergoing demonization. This technique is the Mystic Magic Clan's ultimate technique, a forbidden spell that temporarily turns a mortal into a demon to unleash explosive power. It is just as deadly to the caster as it is strong. Previously, Lena died after using this spell, but Chris has already bypassed that deadly risk. If he strips out the specific parts that amplify dark energy, he can use the laws of this world to his advantage, turning himself into a vessel that collects energy without taking the usual backlash. The method works with that new container. Chris pushes past 90%, absorbing all the sacred darkness. Mapana cannot believe her eyes. A mere mortal, someone she dismissed as a simple insect, has shed his body to become a black crescent. Chris is actually smug enough to explain that this is simply because he is a total genius. He tells her he is leaving now so she can stay behind and keep rotting in this place. Chris turns to leave, but Mapana does not mind. She promises they will meet again. Chris just snorts and flips her off. Even after stepping out of the sacred ground, he can still hear her laughter, muttering that there is zero chance he is ever meeting her again. Now he wonders how much time passed while he was inside. If it has been an entire week, the main family should be in absolute chaos. He drops his demon form, planning a little prank. I mean, this guy literally absorbs all the sacred darkness, flips off a devil, and leaves thinking about trolling people. A servant suddenly bursts into the meeting room, telling the Viscount that Chris has returned. Viscount Langham, acting head of the Dark Magic Clan, demands details. The servant quickly explains that Chris barely survived. He is hanging on by a thread. Healers confirm detect pure dark energy inside him, but it is completely unstable and churning out of control. Because of that, they believe Chris will have a rough time ahead. Dark energy is ruined for him. The council mocks him, saying a greedy scoundrel like him got the exact ending he deserved, complaining that the sacred darkness has been completely wasted. They insist he must pay. The Viscount calmly tells them he will keep that in mind. Once the council leaves, Viscount Langham asks his aide if the rumors are true. The aide replies that it is. Clear something happened to Chris's core since he saw him collapsed beside the healer. The Viscount rhythmically taps his fingers against the table, plotting quiet dread. Even his closest aide grows uneasy standing next to him. Still tapping, the Viscount mutters that Rion was meant to be their heir. Instead, Chris was a mere sacrificial lamb, nothing more than that. That delicate deal with the poison magic clan is completely off track now. Their grand plan to wipe out Jupian and the others has stalled out. To make matters worse, even Lord Noga is looking at the boy. Just one tiny fish is disrupting the entire flow of the river. He absolutely hates it. Letting out a heavy sigh, he orders his aide. Bring Chris to the Darkness Hall tomorrow in front of the vassals. He plans to discard him, right there in front of everyone. The Council of Three, alongside all these powerful figures, wants him gone. Now the Viscount has the nerve to ask if Chris knows his sins. Specifically his actions during the sacred dark rite. Chris nods calmly. He admits he knows, but claims his useless peers deserve the beating. Honestly, he openly regrets not thrashing those completely unworthy weaklings even harder. He even asks if they can still walk around, mocking the council. Naturally, the elders are outraged, but the Viscount suddenly cuts in. He points out that Chris monopolized the clan's most precious resource. Yet the boy failed to show any decent results from it. What kind of results, Chris asks. The Viscount answers immediately. A purity level of at least 70%. Chris plays dumb. And what is the punishment if I fail to reach 70%, he asks. Simple, you will inherit absolutely none of the family's secret techniques. Furthermore, you will be permanently banned from the main estate grounds. Forget about ever inheriting the house of Count Kazor, it is over. But how will they even test his purity right now? Out of nowhere, Prince Eskid raises his hand to volunteer. He suggests a dark energy clash despite the chaos in Chris's core. That would easily reveal the true depth of his internal energy. Since Eskid already holds 70% purity, Chris must overpower him to prove himself. If he wins, it proves his purity is higher than 70%. Keep in mind, this clash is purely a test of raw dark dominance. Power amounts mean nothing, the pure dark force wins every time. If the ranks are similar, only the highest quality dominates. In truth, it is a quick and extremely brutal way to measure strength. To put it simply, this method will utterly destroy the loser's core. Chris silently admits that Eskid is far more sinister than he first expected. Still, he boldly accepts the challenge with a sharp grin. If he can prove his overwhelming purity to everyone in this hall, the Viscount must fully back him and grant him the upcoming prince's test. Arrogant as always, the smug Eskid easily agrees to these bold terms. Direct blood or branch family, it makes zero difference to his ambition. Taking a slow, confident step forward, Eskid issues a chilling warning. If Chris lacks absolute control over his dark power, he is dead. A bad clash can easily shatter his core. Eskid boasts that he will only use the dark energy of a beginner 2-star level. The two square off, letting their dark energies collide in the center. But Chris tells him not to hold back, warning him to worry about his own core instead. Hearing this, Eskid just smirks, eager to see how strong Chris actually is. Eskid lunges forward, but Chris brushes the strike aside like it is absolutely nothing. He did not even need power. Eskid breaks his word. Ramping his energy up to an expert 2-star rank, he strikes again. Still, Chris blocks it effortlessly. The guy is actually pretty disappointed now. Honestly, we all knew the prince was talking too big for his own good. That insult snaps the prince's patience, pushing him to summon a massive 4-star level aura. The crowd watches in terror, fearing Chris's core might shatter, but Eskid does not care. Yet even that fierce attack gets countered. Chris quietly gives him a warning. He points out that lacking control during a clash like this will destroy his own body. That is his only warning. A second later, Eskid is coughing up blood. His frantic attendant rushes straight onto the field, seeing his master barely hanging on. Chris prepares to destroy his core, but the prince quickly surrenders. He gasps out the truth. Chris has achieved at least 90% energy purity. Shock waves ripple through the hall, but Chris only cares about his right to be prince. The Viscount remains absolutely quiet, but a dangerous, heavy aura begins to boil around him. Tapping his fingers slowly on the wooden table, he makes a tense announcement. He declares that Chris is officially allowed to take the royal trial as promised. But he will choose the trial himself, ensuring it is a complete death trap. The Viscount explains that Chris must prove his extreme talent and achieve a massive feat. A true successor needs to accomplish a massive task to show he belongs. To prove his talent, he must reach 3 stars in just 3 months. Our main character is not sweating it at all, knowing his own genius can pull it off. The Viscount smirks, claiming he is very eager to see his progress in 3 months. Later, over some warm tea, the Viscount admits his deep disappointment to Eskid. The defeated prince admits it is his fault. His wounded core is proof of his mistake. He suggests quietly getting rid of Chris now. But the older man tells him to relax, hinting at a secret they both share. They both know exactly why they purposefully restrict their intake to under 70%. The cleaner the dark energy is, the more brutal it is to raise its level. Raising that pure rank will literally take him multiple times longer than anyone else. Reaching 3 stars in 3 months is basically a mathematical impossibility. With 90% purity, the Viscount is sure Chris will hit an impenetrable wall. No amount of genius can save him. Meanwhile, Marie serves Chris a fresh meal. She happily tells him that the entire estate is buzzing about his incredible performance. Right on cue, she starts swooning over his charm, totally head over heels. But Chris quickly tells her to cut it out because it is deeply embarrassing. Marie just shakes her head, admitting her feelings grew so much while waiting. Every single day spent apart felt like an absolute eternity to her. Her sweet confession sparks old memories of his former comrades who used to worry over him. He laughs softly, realizing how much he missed that warmth. It had been ages since he felt this, after escaping that brutal, death-wishing clan, who wanted nothing but his tragic death. His entire past life was one long, bloody war. Some genuinely warm souls, and finally he has the strength to speak. Could never say back then. He smiles and thanks Marie for waiting for him. She feels completely thrilled, asking if he finally understands her deep feelings. She gushingly claims her heart is pounding fast, but Chris dryly reminds her she doesn't even possess one. She instantly counters that her own beating heart was completely stolen away by Chris, leaving him speechless. Still, he rewards her for waiting, so he happily suggests taking a peaceful stroll together. Of course, Marie is overly excited, which makes Chris a bit awkward. Their walk is quiet and peaceful, but Chris is obsessing. Reaching a 3-star level in just 3 months, he knows it will be incredibly tough even with guidance from the branch family tutors. Trying to control 90% pure dark energy is just way too difficult. Right then, Aunt Mary teases him for always wandering off and stirring up trouble. Chris respectfully greets his aunt, but she asks if he has found an instructor to aid his development. Chris eagerly hopes she might teach him, but her response is a flat no. Chris complains that she got his hopes up for absolutely no reason, but she clarifies that someone else will train him, ordering him to follow her right now. Chris quickly excuses Marie, trailing behind his aunt like a lost little duckling. After a while, Chris thanks her for looking out for him even if she won't train him herself. Still, his aunt warns, especially since his new master is brutally harsh. In fact, none of her own siblings could ever survive those incredibly brutal lessons. Still, she urges Chris that this rare chance won't come again, so he must work hard and not disappoint his instructor. Eventually, they arrive and find a small kid staring at them. Chris immediately blabs that the poor kid must be lost, even patting his head while asking about his parents, but that fierce, staring face looks way too familiar to him. Familiar, and trust me, you do not want to mess with him because he's the patriarch's physical incarnation. Chris bows politely. The leader analyzes his energy, realizing Chris achieved over 90% purity. He notes that while it is an amazing feat, it was also an incredibly foolish decision. He explains that even he faced massive obstacles after absorbing 80% of the sacred darkness. He claims their progenitor never would have reached that level without the absolute grace of the Demon Emperor. So he cannot even begin to fathom the massive walls Chris will face. On his journey, the Patriarch actually offers to disperse a portion of that pure dark energy. back into the ether if he wants. He notes that with Chris's immense talent, he should handle around 80% dark energy with his talent, but Chris boldly dares to ask why their great dark magic clan has grown so weak instead. Aunt Mary begins to scold him, but Chris calmly continues anyway. Sure, they might not rival powerhouses like the top-tier mystic magic or undead clans, they are still widely deemed the absolute weakest. Among the 12 noble families, the patriarch demands why he. Chris explains that while their clan has technically prospered in recent generations, other power factions still mock them, saying the dark magic clan is just completely washed up. That is how it used to be, mostly because they lack top-tier fighters at the absolute stage. Those reaching 8-star power are rare, and in the future when the Demon King attacks, Nordian will already be dead, leaving the dark magic clan completely vulnerable. Only a handful of 7-star fiends will remain to stand their ground. Alongside 10,000 regular soldiers, they will face the Demon King in an absolutely hopeless battle. They will be conquered and forced to serve as his mindless slaves. That is exactly why 8-star absolute stage fighters are incredibly important to their survival. Chris knows the clan leader already knows this grim reality. He understands the old man's fear of him being crushed by raw dark energy. That heavy power might stunt his growth, but with this power he will strengthen the clan. He will conquer every trial and become a being of truly limitless power. The clan leader chuckles at his bold speech, but deep down he remains skeptical. He warns Chris not to regret this decision before casting him directly into a bottomless portal. Chris plummets into the cold void, falling through endless darkness. Waking up alone in a dense, terrifying forest, a cold voice announces his first task. To inherit the pure dark energy, he must survive. One quick glance at the massive, terrifying beast behind him proves he is in major danger. High above, the clan leader watches through a scrying crystal while Mary protests. Throwing a fragile 2-star kid into a tier 4 magic monster den is just plain unfair. But the leader thinks one monster is too boring, so he spawns a giant rock lizard. Realizing her complaints only make things worse, Mary silently begs forgiveness for the poor boy. The leader explains that this brutal struggle is the only way forward. He believes true understanding will only come when he faces the absolute threat of death. True understanding only comes when a person is pushed to the absolute brink. Right on the edge of death, still he casually hopes his grandson does not get hurt. Sitting down, he asks Mary for his snacks, and she quickly presents a sweet box. He gladly devours them, claiming he always craves sugar after channeling dark magic. With a quick flick of his finger, he dims the entire sky to watch the show. And today's main event is his own grandson's brutal survival training. Faced with a giant twin-headed bear and a rock lizard, one single direct hit means broken bones. Even worse, that lizard spits deadly green acid. Talk about a completely unfair battle. One slip-up and everything is over, but Chris remains completely unfazed. He stubbornly treats this entire nightmare like a standard training exercise. He calls out to his grandfather, completely convinced there must be some hidden trick to it. There is no response, and Mary knows there is no easy way out. Still, the boy stubbornly searches for a strategic opening to defeat these incredibly powerful beasts. Little does he know, his grandfather just wants to see him get thoroughly thrashed. But the clueless boy remains highly confident, genuinely believing this will be a breeze. The monsters charge him with terrifying speed, but he searches for a counter. Watching him evade, the clan leader mutters that the boy actually possesses real genius. His instincts and reactions are entirely different from ordinary warriors. Mary agrees, though she still worries because he is ultimately just a fragile child. But when that same child drops the two-headed bear, both adults freeze in shock. The stunned leader demands to know his exact strategy, so the boy breaks it down. The beast has massive raw strength, but its speed and magic defense are trash. He seizes the opening right then, injecting pure dark magic straight into its heart. Mary freezes in shock, and even Simon manifests, completely stunned by Chris using dark magic, a lethal move favored by the clan leader. Meanwhile, that massive rock lizard keeps stalking Chris, throwing strike after strike without letting up, but Chris slips past every single blow, remembering the beast actually has 3 hearts made of stone. It won't stay dead unless all 3 get destroyed at the exact same time. So this time he conjures a rope of dark energy, binding the lizard and tightening the grip until the beast shatters. Simon watches, completely fascinated by this clever application of the Dark Death style, but the clan leader tells him to step aside because he is blocking his view. He immediately asks Mary if she actually taught Chris this technique. Since it is not something a person can just pick up, Simon chimes in saying, "There is absolutely no need to study normal dark magic with talent like this." Once the trial ends, Chris is teleported back and offers credit. He tells the clan leader that observing him made it easy to grasp the dark magic on his own. The clan leader quickly warns him not to get cocky because the real training starts right now. He orders the other two to wait outside for a bit. Though Mary hesitates with a worried look before walking out, before starting the actual lesson, the leader asks Chris what he thinks dark magic really represents. Chris figures it means dominating your opponent through perfect total darkness, but when the master presses him on what perfect darkness actually is, the boy draws a blank. So the leader decides to show him, unlocking a heavy, ancient seal where all darkness rests. Down those deep stairs, 12 distinct abysses wait for anyone brave enough to seek their power. Suddenly, the leader unleashes an overwhelming aura directly at Chris. For a second, the boy feels his throat get sliced, yet he remains completely unharmed. The leader explains it was a conceptual blade, designed to slice only what he wills, a legendary black sword forged from raw shadow. He grants Chris 1 month to master this blade before simply turning around and walking away. Chris stands there dazed, struggling to wrap his head around what he just witnessed. He goes back to his usual routine, running and training hard, though he realizes his physical body needs more strength to handle this incredible weight. Maybe it is time to push harder. He tries channeling dark energy into his palms, but the spark fizzles out instantly. Clearly, this is not going to be easy. Even when he gets it to manifest, maintaining it for 10 seconds is a massive struggle. It is nothing like the leader's absolute shadow, which felt immensely heavy and perfect. He mumbles the master's instructions again, searching for the hidden trick behind the technique. Just like that, 1 month flies by and the clan leader returns with Mary to check on his progress. The old man assumes the boy has finally realized his limits by now, but Mary stays silent. Seeing her expression, he asks if she is really that concerned about the prince's exam, which is only 2 months away. The leader explains that forcing rapid growth is impossible given the rare purity of his dark energy. Pushing too hard would only cause him to hit a massive wall, so building a strong foundation is key. But when they finally step into the training grounds, their jaws drop. Chris is holding a fully formed dark blade. The master is left entirely speechless while Chris calmly thanks him. He actually reached 3 stars, all thanks to his master. But suddenly the blade vanished just like that, leaving Chris pretty disappointed. The master then explains that this massive breakthrough was only possible because his master taught him about the 12 abysses, where each one represents a critical trait of the dark sword. But internally, the master curses his luck, seeing that Chris has already conjured the genuine dark sword. He did not just blow past expectations, but completely shattered them. It took the master a whole year of grueling work just to create a standard dark sword, and he honestly thought it would take a lifetime to master the 12 forms of dark magic and manifest the true blade. Yet Chris did it in a single month, showing the old man a real spark of hope at the end of his long journey. He smiles, warning the young mage to prepare himself for tomorrow because things are about to get brutal. Chris plays the part of the perfect, polite student and even cheers his mentor on. One hurdle down, meaning it is finally time to celebrate. He sneaks off to his secret sanctuary, pulling out a bottle of rare, expensive alcohol he could only dream of holding in his past life. He wants to drink it before Marie spots him, but an unexpected guest suddenly cuts him off and scolds him for drinking so early in the day. Chris has absolutely no clue who she is, but she is a 3-star magician, and the unique color of her eyes proves she does not belong to the dark magic clan. When he asks if they have met, she snaps. A hard slap sends him crashing straight to the ground. Her guard quickly steps in, stopping her before pulling her away. Now Sebastian rushes right over to the furious Chris and reveals the shocking truth. That girl is Marissa from the notorious poison dark magic family. Suddenly, Chris puts the pieces together and realizes she must be his fiancée, but Sebastian clarifies. Talk about an awkward reunion, right? Now he belatedly realizes he is in big trouble. Marissa walks away with a cold, steady stride, but her mind drifts straight to the past. She was just 8 years old, feeling completely ignored at a clan gathering. Since everyone only cared about her brother, to make matters worse, people whispered cruel rumors about her, calling her a child born out of wedlock. They whispered that she was only present because her father, Du Quan's son, was impotent and desperately needed a daughter to secure a son-in-law, right when she was feeling completely down. Young Chris stepped up and asked what she was doing. Marissa was instantly captivated. She quietly introduced herself. Chris introduced himself in return and told her to ignore the adults, promising she could pay them back later. When she grew up, Marissa totally agreed, already planning to become the absolute strongest dark mage and utterly crush anyone who ever looked down on her. Chris praised her fierce ambition, which touched her heart even more. He decided to stay on her good side, offering to show her around the legendary House of Dark Magic. She blushed deeply but accepted. Back in the present, Marissa shakes those memories away, knowing they belong to a bygone era, even if it was just a political engagement. Meant to unite two rival families, it still kept her awake at night, dreaming about a future they might share, but she is not that naive girl anymore. Striding with absolute confidence, she steps directly into the Viscount's office and greets him. The Viscount cuts straight to the chase, prompting her to bring up the relic that appeared in the neutral zone between their two houses. The Viscount asks what the ultimate poison family wants, since they took the last relic discovered last time. Marissa refuses to yield because she knows how their rivals in the dark magic family would act if roles were reversed. She proposes a fair deal. Each family sends an exploration team. The first team to find the relic keeps it, but she demands that their group has a strict limit of 10 dark mages of 3-star rank or lower. This keeps both clans from clashing directly, because heavy losses on both sides would only benefit their common enemies. The Viscount agrees immediately, but his quick compliance makes her highly suspicious. He instantly drops the other shoe if her family breaks the deal. They lose this relic and surrender the previous one they already claimed. That means full ownership goes straight to the Dark Magic clan. Breaking the deal includes any underhanded tricks, like dirty traps or ambushes, their family specialty. Marissa accepts these incredibly heavy terms without a second thought. The Viscount then asks if she will personally lead the hunt. She confirms she will. He smiles, eager to see her legendary power. The famed myriad poison maiden simply nods and takes her leave. Watching her depart, he slowly walks over to his chessboard. He knocks over the pieces representing Marissa and Juvian, planning a bloody stage. Soon 2 months pass, the seasons shift and training intensifies. While Chris pushes his limits, other players begin their move. Old romances spark complicated feelings, while failed contenders get tossed aside. Meanwhile, those consumed by bitter jealousy silently sharpen their knives. Everyone is scheming, laying the groundwork for what comes next. And just like that, the time has come for Chris to step up. He summons a dark sword, instantly shocking the entire room. Seeing Eshid's sour face, he remembers the leader's warning. Do not show your real power yet, so Chris held back today. Still, just thinking about that priceless, shocked look on his face makes him grin. The Viscount nods in approval, then reveals the next challenge. Chris must contribute to the relic hunt on the neutral grounds. This task seems way simpler than he expected, so he asks to go alone. But the Viscount refuses, ordering him to join Princess Juvian's unit instead. Royne originally held this crucial mission, meaning Chris should feel honored. He decides not to push back, better to just follow orders. Eshid grumbles, worried that the boy will screw up yet again. But his father calms him down. Everything is going exactly to plan. Chris expected a deadlier trap, but this easy mission feels highly suspicious. Something about this setup is off, making him feel incredibly uneasy. He recalls the Viscount mentioning Royne, the original heir in the past timeline. How did the players from the original history end up here? Originally, Royne was supposed to be named the heir, not Christian. Yet Chris has heard absolutely nothing about Royne during the current crisis. He recalls a fox sharing a secret about the relic in exchange for some soft petting. The bitter dispute between the rival clans was kept entirely secret. Nobody really knew the truth back then, despite rumors claiming that the entire Dark Mage household was completely wiped out during the relic exploration. But the ultimate poison clan suffered incredibly heavy, bloody losses too. Strangely, both sides buried the tragedy deep, planting the seeds of disaster. This whole disaster started when Nordione died by the hands of Viscount Langham's son. Without that death, the demon king of evil blood could never have taken over. The Dark Mage family so effortlessly, this tragedy hastened the end times. Connecting the dots, Chris realizes that since the mages are dead, he is the real target this time instead of Royne. This is no total trap set by Langham, but there is zero proof yet. Moving blindly is risky, especially since he is only at third-level mastery. He needs to figure out his options. Preparation is key right now. Deciding to scope things out, Chris heads outside only to get blocked by Royne. "Where are you going?" The arrogant jerk demands answers. Word travels fast. He knows about the upcoming exploration and wants to make sure Chris takes his place. But Chris is not the type to just sit there and take his attitude. He bluntly points out that Royne was dropped because he is simply incompetent. That brutal truth instantly pushes Royne over the edge, sending him into a rage. He strikes out, but Chris effortlessly tilts his head to dodge, absolutely cold. Shocked, Royne stands frozen while Chris calmly says that is enough pleasantries. Since they clearly despise each other, Chris promises to stay out of his sight. At least until the journey begins. Still, Royne reaches for his weapon anyway. But deep down, he knows Chris did not even blink during that close call. He knew where the blow would land, no flinch, no hesitation. Royne finally registers how dangerous this guy is. Meanwhile, Chris heads into town. He wanders through the bustling outer village market, hoping to grab a cold drink. But an old shopkeeper stops him, so Chris pulls some quick card tricks instead. He easily wins enough cash to buy a massive pile of delicious meat skewers. While he actually came here to visit a store, he has other issues. Stalkers, he needs to deal with them first, but suddenly, a hand covers his mouth, dragging him straight into a dark, quiet alleyway. The hooded girl is a total stranger, but she warns him about his stalkers. Fortunately, her subordinates already dealt with them, so he is safe for now. Still, it is pretty hard to feel safe when someone just kidnapped you. He demands to know who she is, but she only mentions the evil King Castle. She claims she is trying to stop a dark corruption spreading through the area. Time is running out, so Chris agrees to let her lead the way. After walking for a while, he asks where exactly they are even heading. Instead of answering, she reveals that people are vanishing from the castle recently. They are disappearing without a trace, and the safe zones are failing. Every single day, safe zones fail. The chaos is constantly growing. Torn apart by three powerful families, the place is ruled by absolute fear. The rulers here do not give a damn about human lives or suffering. And the death of their own people, that is why she needs backing from several families to wipe out these rogue factions, but she cannot demand assistance without offering something valuable in return. Chris is caught completely off guard when she offers him crucial intel to settle the chaos currently threatening his dark mage family. Specifically, she reveals that Viscount Langham is conspiring with a high-ranking elder of the Poison clan to get rid of Marissa. Hearing this shocks Chris too. His core because he cannot grasp her motive, but the girl explains that if these major events cause the two main families to lose their footing, the masterminds of the evil King Castle will move openly. That could easily collapse the balance among the 12 Dark Mage families, triggering a massive tragedy. Because of this, she hopes Chris is ready for the upcoming relic hunt and wants him to secure his spot as the prince of the Dark Mage family, to stand firm against those disrupting the peace. Chris admits her information network is pretty impressive, since she somehow knows he wants to become a prince through this high-stakes relic hunt. Even so, he cannot blindly trust her and demands some actual collateral to secure their alliance. Her sudden hesitation makes Chris suspect she has nothing of value to give until she pulls out an item. That leaves him completely speechless. Once they part ways, she looks back in his direction before vanishing. She asks her own shadow why revealing her true identity is forbidden to Chris, but the entity lurking in the darkness warns her that keeping secrets is for her own safety, because if he ever leaks her real name under duress, things will get incredibly dangerous. Taking the advice, she alters her appearance to a girl Named Edrine, Chris might seem cool and composed, but inside, oh, he is absolutely thrilled. To have obtained a VIP pass to the legendary Dark Auction House, a secret market, trading in forbidden relics and exotic beasts, these exclusive invitation cards are issued solely to verified high nobility and ultra-wealthy merchants. In his past life, none of his allies could ever acquire one, making entry almost impossible. The name printed on it reads Leah de Balfman, a noble name he has never once encountered. He recalls her warning regarding the conspiracy between those rival families, but quickly shakes his head. To focus, trusting an unverified stranger is always a gamble. For now, it is wiser to focus on his own moves. First up, sending a message. Pigeon to coordinate a meeting with a contact. Soon he stands before a grand, glowing building, only for the guard to sneer that kids are not allowed inside. Chris simply flashes his prestigious VIP card, rendering the guard utterly speechless as he permits entry. Chris steps into a breathtakingly opulent hall teeming with elite guests. A polite attendant approaches, asking if he is indeed Lady Leah de Balfman. Chris nods, adopting that identity for the day. The staff member clearly senses something is off, but he dare not question anyone holding that elite token. Chris demands an immediate audience with the branch manager, showing the card once more. He is quickly guided to a private luxury lounge. While the attendant scrambles to summon his boss, looking around, Chris notes that the decor is incredibly high-end, fitting for the powerful Rudolph Merchant Guild. This organization is a massive empire, rivaling even the Union's elite Deer Guild. And they practically control the entire black market network. They dominate all trade routes, and rumor says if Rudolph cannot find it, nobody can. A man soon enters the room, introducing himself as Rubid, the Rudolph Guild's branch manager. He asks if the boy needs something, but Chris immediately demands to see Ruina. Rubid freezes. In sheer shock, Chris asks if he really does not know her. Of course, Rubid knows Ruina is the master of the Deer Guild, but he acts clueless. He claims he cannot just summon her, but Chris does not buy the lie. After all, Ruina is standing right in front of him. Still, the man plays dumb. Chris just scoffs, noting that the relic's magic is actually quite impressive. He tells him to drop the fake act since they will meet quite often. Gritting his teeth, Rubid shifts into Ruina, demanding to know how he found out. Chris just smirks, remembering how badly she screwed him over in his past life. Naturally, he paid her back tenfold later on. Now he mocks her trashy relic. He laughs at the Rudolph Guild master's cheap tricks, then walks out loaded with loot. His pockets are literally bursting with gold. This first extortion haul is absolutely insane. He is basically saving the world, so she should honestly thank him for the robbery. Sure, this loot won't instantly make him godlike, but it keeps his plans moving. At the very least, he can now start messing with the Viscount's schemes. Later, Royne is overseeing the soldiers' training when he spots Chris wandering by. He stops him, offering a spot in the drills, but Chris instantly declines. Claiming he is far too exhausted from slacking off, he just walks away. The nearby redhead sneers at his lazy attitude, but Royne tells him to let it go. Honestly, the kid is not worth the effort. Missing out on merit is Chris's loss. Still, Royne cannot help but wonder why the boy is acting so incredibly stupid lately. Soon, Rubid delivers the requested herbs, curiously asking what they are actually for. Chris immediately shuts him down, tossing over some gaudy junk from his attic as payment. Rubid begs him to keep his identity a secret, and Chris easily agrees. He cheerfully hopes they will meet again, but Rubid wants absolutely nothing to do with him. Seeing his guest eager to leave, Chris drops a massive bomb. A war is coming. Rubid freezes. Honestly, he should have seen it coming with his constant traveling. Running trade routes across the continent means he knows how tense things are. Moving between the Alliance and the magical empire is about to get impossible. Once the borders lock down, he will be trapped in a single kingdom. Locked routes mean his massive trade profits will instantly be cut in half. Rubid stammers that predicting a war is a massive reach, but Chris has receipts. The unsettling rumors leaking from the Four Kings Castle are definitely not baseless. Deep down, Rubid has already felt that toxic, heavy atmosphere brewing over there. Hostile noble houses are practically begging for a massive clash with the Alliance. Minor border skirmishes are already sparking left and right in the shadows. Rubid mutters that he cannot stop a full-scale war anyway, so why tell him? That is when Chris makes his real move. He wants Rubid to sponsor him. Together, they can reshape the future and stop this brutal war from ever happening. As Rubid stares in utter confusion, Chris starts mapping out his grand plan. The war party plans to march straight through the southern magical nation. But if Chris rises to power as a prince and prepares his defenses now, they can entirely avoid the catastrophic fallout that is heading their way. Best of all, it keeps Rubid's precious business completely safe and thriving. Chris reaches his hand out. Rubid sees the kid isn't lying and finally decides to buy in for the long haul, but he warns Chris he will bail instantly. The second that trust is broken, he has no clue Chris is already holding a mountain of easy excuses to play him like a fiddle. The pair wrap up their selfish business deal on a pretty tense note, right after Chris gets straight to work with the raw herbs, a tough cure to brew, especially since elite poison demon sect masters are behind this mess, but there is a catch. It has been a long time since he last brewed this formula, so he cannot guarantee perfect results. Staring closely at the boiling pot, deep memories start bubbling up inside. A flashback begins, back with the Divine Physician clan. A young Chris was getting absolutely ripped apart over his herb choices by their brilliant leader, Ella. He actually first crossed paths with her on the bloody battlefields of the T-War. Even as a little girl, she was forced into combat because the blood-drinking demon King completely slaughtered her whole clan. Her people were famously known as the absolute best doctors on Earth, making them an incredibly massive thorn in the demon's side. Tragically, even Ella could not outrun his sharp blade. Back in the memory, she watches Chris intently while he works on the medicine. She calls him a complete freak for whipping up a legendary pill off just a few basic pointers, but Chris quickly fires back, noting that their legendary medical lineage is not all that special if their supreme leader is a fragile bedridden patient. Ella lets out a heavy cough and quietly admits she really should not be resting while the entire world out there is drowning in pain. Even worse, it breaks her heart that her family's precious bloodline is completely dead. Chris tells her straight, forget the past tragedies and focus on healing right now. She has to live. Ella then reaches out and hands him the legendary book of her family's hidden medical arts. While choking back blood, she practically begs Chris to rescue those who are hurting. In her stead, bowing deeply, Chris agrees and asks to formally become her personal disciple. Ella gives a soft smile, knowing she found the perfect heir if he is truly willing to call her his master, but tragically, very soon after, she takes her final breath, leaving Chris to inherit the legendary title of the Divine Physician clan. He never quite fully mastered their hidden arts because some pages were completely missing. Still, he travels from war to war, determined to honor the promise he made her. Thanks to that relentless drive, people eventually start calling him the saint of the battlefield. He hopes she is resting in peace somewhere up there, but he still intends to honor that promise. Cut back to the present. The Count gets absolutely thrilled when a letter from Chris finally arrives. He immediately starts boasting about his boy's incredible deeds, but opening the letter, his entire face completely twists like he just bit a sour lemon. Total mood killer. After a brief silence, he proudly commands his butler to start preparing for his son's big departure. Elsewhere, Dupian is laying out strategic plans and unit formations, but when it's Chris's turn, he flatly announces he is rolling completely solo. Dupian is absolutely livid, but Chris calmly argues himself, since they simply cannot afford to take unnecessary risks. They slow down. The Poison Clan is already ahead. Dupian warns him that this area crawls with high-level beasts and that Chris cannot expect a rescue crew if he gets into deep trouble. Chris tells him to mind his own business instead and offers him an antidote. Dupian refuses it. Chris just gulps the medicine down right there, casually teasing him about it. Just then Marissa arrives, instantly picking up on the thick tension, but instead of dealing with the elephant in the room, Dupian mocks her for showing up late. Marissa argues she was perfectly on time, but when Dupian reminds her of the exploration rules, especially the part about forbidding traps and ambushes, things quickly get heated since both of them are incredibly blunt and stubborn by nature, but they still have work to do, so they both turn their attention back to their own teams. Chris takes off on his solo run, but here is the crazy part that leaves Dupian completely shocked. Chris tosses away the antidote pills and his communicator before running off. Chris tears through the area, slicing down monsters with ease since he already knows these magical realms inside out from his past life, which makes him wonder for a second if Dupian actually worried about him. The thought vanishes instantly. Dupian is just far too cold of a person, and he probably would not even bleed if you stabbed him. With that thought gone, Chris focuses back on Marquis Langham's assassination plot. But there is still zero sign of any attack, almost as if the timing was planned. Suddenly, Marissa pops up right in front of him, looking completely shocked. Herself, silence. An awkward pause hangs between them until Chris realizes that he wandered into her group's assigned territory by mistake. He immediately apologizes for crossing into her territory. Marissa simply tells him to be careful, while Chris tries to back off, but then he remembers that her own family wants her dead. He simply cannot stop himself from speaking up the moment he asks whether she is being mistreated back home for being the second daughter. Marissa snaps at him like he crossed a major line. Chris instantly realizes he stepped on a landmine. After all, family abuse is something he understands way too well himself. He apologizes instantly, but Marissa's anger only flares hotter as she demands a real, proper apology. Right this second, seeing her rage, Chris realizes the threat is far more serious than a simple domestic feud. Someone genuinely wants her dead, which means he has to dig deeper to find the puppet master. Until then, Marissa is a target, so Chris decides he must keep her alive. Until backup finally arrives, he tells her that he has absolutely no choice but to stall, especially since that snap tree nearby proves that she swung first, and by the rules that means he gets the relic. Marissa snaps back that she only acted in self-defense since he insulted her family, dragging up all that pain she suffered from their broken engagement. It is a weak excuse, but Marissa still wastes zero time chucking her lethal poison right at Chris. The split second it lands, Chris starts choking while Marissa calmly details how the venom works. Just like a typical villain spilling their grand plan, she demands that he kneel down and beg while she hurls even more poison bottles his way. But before she can celebrate her quick victory, Chris suddenly reaches through the thick smoke, grabs her hand, and smoothly pulls her close, saying begging is just not going to happen. First, he completely rizzes her up by leaning in so close they are practically touching lips. Then he casually praises her talent as the Poison King, admitting it hurt like absolute hell. Before he managed to neutralize it, once Marissa snaps out of it, she confidently boasts that she holds the only existing antidote, but Chris simply tells her he borrowed some techniques from the Divine Doctor clan to make a universal cure for himself. Marissa is left completely baffled by this, but instead of explaining, Chris delivers a swift, sudden karate chop that knocks her out cold. He catches her limp body in his arms, like some classic romantic hero promising to save her. Not exactly the average way to handle your own future wife, is it? Next, he ties her to a tree and somehow confiscates her communication device from out of nowhere. After messing with it, he pings her team with a fake distress signal. With this mess sorted, he feels pretty sure they won't cross paths anytime soon. Chris then takes off, dashing through the dense trees while giving a quick rundown on ancient relics. These bizarre items usually stay hidden for ages or just fall from the sky, as if higher powers are dropping trials on the miserable mortals crawling down below. This time the prize is supposed to be the legendary Amulet of Twilight. According to Lena, its hidden powers were totally unknown at first, so everyone basically ignored it. But after 2 full years of testing, that crazy sage Husak figured it out. That single breakthrough triggered a disaster that ultimately got Nordian killed. Chris is absolutely set on keeping Nordian alive in this timeline, because putting off the end of the world even slightly is a win. As he creeps deeper into the wilderness, Chris spots something weird and halts in his tracks. Checking the soft dirt below, he finds a fresh trail of footprints heading deeper in. Since relics don't have feet, that means another player beat him to it. Chris masks his presence completely and soon spots a small group of warriors lurking nearby, waiting for Maris's squad to show up. Once he feels their dark energy, he immediately recognizes the Poison Demon clan. One guy is a 4-star mage, while a hooded female demon seems around 5 stars. But the last fighter is impossible to read, carrying a strange, murky aura. That 4-star chump is a total idiot, especially since he loudly brags about wanting Marissa dead without even lowering his voice. The way he babbles makes him sound like a classic arrogant noble heir. Honestly, it is pretty clear this is some internal clan succession war. These guys genuinely believe this hit will clear out their rivals and secure their power, especially with the relic deal already locked in. They don't even dare to crack open the chest to look inside just yet. Since they have to give it to Langham anyway, looking inside would only sting. It would just make losing it hurt more. Finally, the idiot orders his partners to move. He sends the others to find Marissa while he guards the relic. Chris considers jumping the 4-star mage directly, but quickly rethinks his strategy. Direct combat is just too troublesome. Stealing the relic sounds way more fun. As he scans the area, he spots a group of wild monkeys nearby. An absolute goldmine of a distraction is handing itself right to him. Meanwhile, the clueless guard is yawning, looking like a total background character. Right then, something wet and heavy drops directly onto his head. It is fresh monkey poop. Humiliated and absolutely furious, the guy loses his mind. He starts throwing hands with the monkeys, chasing them deep into the trees. With the guard gone, Chris quietly approaches the relic, but instead of running, he decides to have some fun. Honestly, you have to love this level of petty. He pulls out a special beast storing amulet and slips it around his neck. He opens his storage matrix, digging around until he pulls out a decoy box. It is the replica box he took from Ruina. He swaps them. He eagerly pops open the stolen container, expecting the ultimate prize, but instantly, he realizes the treasure inside is not the amulet of Twilight he wanted. Meanwhile, Marissa finally wakes up, realizing she is tied tightly to a tree. As her head clears, she remembers exactly what Chris did to her. She screams in rage, calling him a spineless coward for resorting to trickery. He should have just apologized. She is still absolutely seething. That is when Merlin finally finds her, though the Poison King is clueless. He knows nothing about her mysterious companion. Meanwhile, Jupian keeps searching. He quietly stares at the antidote pill resting in the palm of his hand. His men ask why he even kept it, but Jupian has no answer. He cannot explain why he chose to trust Chris back there. As they trek through the forest, he cannot stop worrying about the kid. Wandering alone out here is suicide, but Chris made his own choice. He left the group voluntarily, shortly after the team spots the target. They secure the relic first, officially beating the Poison Clan to the prize. Mission accomplished. Jupian orders his men to send out the communication signals. They need to prep for extraction immediately, as they begin to head back. The soldiers cheer, congratulating their leader on a flawless operation. Yet Jupian keeps looking back, his mind still stuck on Chris. Suddenly, he halts, ordering 2 separate squads to stay behind and search. The men clearly do not want to waste time on a useless rogue. But Jupian reminds them that Chris still carries the main house bloodline. If the worst happened, they must at least retrieve his body for honor. It is about family pride, just as they turn to move out. The massive mountain behind them suddenly crumbles, completely blocking their exit route. Jupian senses an overwhelming aura towering right above them on the peak. He screams a warning, but the trap is already sprung. Before anyone can form up, a deadly cloud of toxic mist floods the valley. It blankets the entire unit, high above the attacker's smile. The fight is already over because they used blue flower, the ultimate deadly poison. It was created by Marissa herself, but stolen from her lab to frame her. They wanted to pin this attack on her and destroy the Dark Demon clan. A hooded woman steps forward, but a sword flies right at her. She barely blocks it in the nick of time. Jupian immediately recognizes her. She is definitely from the notorious Poison clan. He shouts that this attack violates their rules, but she does not care. Instead, she is completely baffled as to why they are still standing and breathing. After all, everyone knows the blue flower poison is absolutely lethal and has no antidote. Right then, Jupian finally connects the dots and realizes how they survived. Those strange antidote pills Chris left behind must have completely neutralized the toxin. Annoyed, the hooded woman decides to wipe them all out personally. Jupian is forced to raise his sword, his hands shaking with fear. He can sense she is a powerful 5-star mage. Did Marissa betray him? He thinks she secretly summoned her, but then a rain of weapons falls. A massive rain of weapons interrupts them. The fight stops cold. Marissa and Merlin step onto the battlefield, but the masked woman is furious. This was definitely not her plan, her face says it all. Yet here Marissa is, standing tall, and she brought some serious backup. Alongside her is the dangerous vice commander of the Black Swamp Knights. Marissa is furious. Someone dared to steal and use her signature poison. She immediately demands to know who dared to steal her work. The hooded woman just smirks, casually summoning a small army of minions. Marissa instantly realizes the enemy knew their squad lacked any elite mages. Just as Jupian prepares for the worst, a familiar face appears. Chris suddenly drops in out of nowhere, completely out of the blue. And according to him, his dramatic entrance is just a total coincidence. Talk about perfect timing, Chris casually acts like absolutely nothing is wrong. He jokes that they must have missed him, but they quickly deny it. Even their enemies seem amused by this weird little reunion before they die. Marissa hates to admit it, but they stand zero chance against her. A 5-star mage is simply too strong, even if they fight together. But Chris, he is the only one who thinks ranks mean absolutely nothing. He calmly reaches into his void storage to pull out a solution. He grabs a handful of items and tosses them to his teammates. Each of them catches a rather strange piece of glowing jewelry. It turns out these are legendary artifacts designed to boost their magical power. Merlin immediately puts her necklace on. Meanwhile, Jupian curiously examines the strange device in his hands. Marissa looks downright offended to be handed such a ridiculous-looking item. But when Jupian decides to put his artifact on, something crazy happens. Instantly, his power surges, skyrocketing straight toward a legendary 6-star level. Chris knows he did not give him anything that strong, but keeps quiet. Merlin also equips her artifact without a single moment of hesitation. She already got a heads up earlier, so she is fully prepared. Chris casually drops the news that he's taking off for something far more important. Merlin instantly stops him, demanding they duel the second he gets back. Marissa also tries her best, begging him to stay put and help them fight. But Chris vanishes, leaving them without a single answer. Surprisingly, Jupian takes his side, believing Chris has some kind of secret plan. Marissa finds this pretty weird, noticing Jupian is suddenly defending the guy. Meanwhile, across the field, their enemy gears up and warns her squad to focus. She confidently shows off her specialized black steel armor. It's a terrifying gear that only elite 5-star warriors can actually use. Still, Merlin just steps forward without showing a single trace of fear. She warns everyone that a high rank does not guarantee an easy win. In her eyes, raw arrogance is what always ruins the strongest fighters. Jupian totally agrees, promising to crush any cocky fool relying purely on power. The only one still dragging her feet is Marissa, looking completely unsure of herself. But after some quick pressure, she reluctantly slips on that ridiculous frog headband. Wearing her silly artifact, she readies herself to fight beside them. The hooded leader grits her teeth, completely insulted by their absolute nerve. She lunges, but Merlin blocks head-on until the woman suddenly vanishes. Reappearing behind her, she strikes, but Merlin barely blocks the heavy blade. The enemy gives her a brief nod of respect but doesn't slow down. Her next flurry of strikes connects, drawing blood and pushing Merlin back. The woman insults the Swamp Knights, but Merlin fires a sharp retort right back. This absolutely infuriates the woman, sending her into a wild, angry charge. Merlin waits for the perfect moment, then suddenly grabs the woman's bare face. She channels a curse directly, leaving the woman baffled by its 4-star power. Merlin calmly reveals that her artifact actually boosts her magic through blood, which means she purposely took those hits earlier to trigger the spell. Talk about a risky play, with one final blow she ends it. The 5-star mage spits up blood and collapses to the floor. Her allies try to rush over, but they are too busy defending themselves. Meanwhile, Chris slips through the dark woods, hunting for a hidden third party. Finally, the mystery man steps out, glaring with pure, unbridled rage. But Chris just smiles, completely unfazed and totally ready for a fight. He studies the dark, toxic energy flowing from his opponent's core. Something is definitely off. This guy is not part of the Poison clan. Instead of attacking directly, Chris lazily picks up some tiny stones. He flicks them forward like darts, but the hooded man easily dodges, until one stray pebble strikes him directly on his porcelain mask. Chris closely tracks his physical reactions and the way he shifts his weight. That specific movement pattern gives the secret away in an instant. The hidden opponent can only be Ashid, forced to reveal himself, he unmasks. His presence traces back to a secret plot made by Count Langham. The plan was simple: separate Jupian and Marissa to pick them off. Ashid had one sole job: eliminate Chris. The orders were brutal and clear. No one on this entire expedition was allowed to make it back alive. Ashid can't help but curse under his breath. His plan is already falling apart. Jupian's entire unit is still alive, and Merlin unexpectedly joined them too. If Ashid eliminates Chris right here, the noise might draw unwanted attention. That would immediately raise major questions about why he was away from the mansion. Even worse, this mess could easily drag his father straight into the investigation. Chris watches him freeze up and decides to poke fun at the sudden silence. That tiny jab pushes Ashid over the edge. He'll deal with Chris first. He'll worry about the consequences later. Ashid unsheathes a dark black sword. Chris answers by drawing his own blade. The two immediately clash. Sparks fly as their swords collide in a rapid exchange of blows. Suddenly, Ashid conjures multiple clones of himself, briefly surprising Chris. Chris blocks strikes from all sides as the illusions rush him head-on. But the real Ashid is hiding within the crowd, waiting to strike. Chris suddenly charges directly toward one of the figures to end this quickly. But the moment his strike lands, the opponent in front of him vanishes. It's another fake. Right then, the real Ashid appears behind him for a heavy blow. The crushing impact of the strike literally blasts the ground wide open. A massive crater forms. To Ashid, this fight should already be over. But instead, Chris unleashes an absolute explosion of energy across the field. The shockwave instantly shatters every single illusion in the area. Ashid stands frozen in shock. Chris is holding a legendary black sword. Before Ashid can even react, Chris closes the distance in a flash. He launches a devastating counter. Ashid desperately raises his blade to block. But his defense fails miserably. This crushing defeat hits him incredibly hard. Getting completely overwhelmed by a mere branch family member fills him with humiliation. Chris calmly tells him to accept defeat if he wants to avoid total embarrassment. He warns him about the rumors spreading to the public. A scandal like this would only ruin Marquis Langham's reputation. Ashid panics, wondering if Chris knows about their entire plan already. For now, he plays along and thanks Chris for saving his reputation. He reaches out a hand. Chris accepts the gesture, but things suddenly turn sour. The grip tightens instantly as a dark surge of demonic energy erupts. The shockwave blasts Ashid directly, his body absorbing the full force. The heat burns him from inside, forcing him to cough blood and collapse. Chris stands over him, reminding himself of a brutal rule in this world. Trusting anyone too easily is the fastest way to get yourself killed. He rushes back to the group, but their ridiculously intense expressions freeze him. He immediately tells them to back away, but Marissa quickly speaks up. She reminds him they only look like this because of his tacky artifacts. Merlin reports that their mission is complete and the mages are dealt with. They burn them to ash to ensure absolutely no evidence remains. Marissa hesitates, but Jupian cuts in to ask where he went. Chris casually claims he was just taking a walk around the area. After all, an elegant noble like him shouldn't get dirty in battles. But Marissa points out his bruises with a deeply worried look. She asks if he encountered other family traitors. Chris is clearly frazzled by how cute she is, but he keeps his cool and suggests they withdraw. He fought further away on purpose just so Ash would have a chance to flee. It turns out his promise to keep this quiet is actually completely real, mostly because blowing it up would only provoke Langham more. Besides, he already got the emblem of Constellation, and every single person he wanted to protect has successfully survived now. So that is enough for now. A whole week passes, and during this time Chris is constantly being bobbied by Marie. Meanwhile, the Poison clan is left in a tough spot because of this entire mess, but they still manage to settle things with heavy compensation. Still, this ending is so much better than the past timeline where everyone got wiped out and Duquan does not have to hand over the relic to Langham. Meanwhile, Merlin retreats to the Dark Mage clan as soon as she escapes that giant canyon, while Marissa faithfully keeps her absolute promise to keep Merlin's role a total secret. Back at the table, Marie is dead set on spoon-feeding Chris because her undead heart goes totally wild just thinking of taking care of him. The boy quickly tells her to stop imagining weird things, reminding her that she technically does not even have a heart anymore. But Marie suddenly starts vibrating on purpose, desperately trying to prove how incredibly much her own heart is affected by Chris. She even insists on feeding him, though Chris wants absolutely no part of it. Left with no choice, she simply shoves the spoon right into his face, continuing her relentless one-sided flirting. Meanwhile, from across the other side of the table, Jupian watches this ridiculous display, making the vibe pretty awkward. Chris then tells the guy that he really does not need to keep visiting him, yet Jupian stubbornly insists on staying because he feels personally responsible. At this point, Chris practically wants to choke himself, especially since Marie has already started seeing Jupian as her ultimate love rival. Trying to play polite, she offers him some fresh blood juice, but Jupian coldly replies that he actually very much prefers green onion juice instead. When Marie becomes visibly dejected, Chris cannot help but admit that Jupian is surprisingly strong in situations like this. Out of nowhere, though, the other boy suddenly declares he will totally crush Chris someday. And Chris just casually gives him permission to do so, then, completely out of nowhere, Jupian says thanks, catching Chris completely off guard. Chris just tells him to speak up a little bit louder, which alone makes the other guy fume at his absolute audacity. Jupian warns him that today is the last day he gets to smile like that, because he has promised to become a prince now. Once he becomes a prince, things will be drastically different from now on, so he tells Chris to prepare. Chris calmly acknowledges that things will definitely be different because up until now, he was someone who was not even worth stepping on. But the second he becomes an equal competitor, everyone is going to immediately rush forward now. Forward just to crush him. He will have to face every single big shot across the kingdom, and he even wonders if Jupian will end up being one of them. Sensing his gaze, Jupian turns and suddenly asks if Chris finds him pretty. Chris stays completely silent because he can feel an unbreakable fourth wall forming right there. After a very awkward moment, Jupian finally stands up and simply decides to leave, maybe feeling a bit embarrassed all of a sudden. Chris lets out a long sigh. Chris sighs in relief. He starts recharging, but that peace is short-lived. Footsteps. He hears footsteps approaching again, leaving him pretty irritated. He asks why Jupian came back, but looking closer, he realizes his mistake. Actually, it is Marissa standing there. She is gracing him with her presence. She stopped by to check on Chris, looking like she expected some epic disaster. Ironically, Chris can stare down a literal demon lord without breaking a sweat. But the moment a woman shows up, this powerful guy turns completely awkward. He turns into a total awkward potato. Then Marissa drops a massive bombshell. She explains that her father wants to see him, and not just anyone but Duke Hunt himself, the leader of the Extreme Poison clan and an 8-star Magic Lord. Naturally, Chris is curious, and on the way there, Marissa starts grilling him about conspiracy stuff, but Chris keeps his answers vague. He simply claims he got his info from some mysterious source. This reminds Marissa of when Merlin first introduced herself, revealing her secret undercover mission to infiltrate the expedition. Back then, Marissa thought they were breaking rules, but Merlin spilled all the tea about assassins and how Chris had quietly ordered her to watch Marissa's back. She complains he could have at least given her some hint, but Chris explains he stayed quiet because she was already a target. Still, she sincerely thanks him for saving her. Chris casually admits she is pretty important to him, immediately turning Marissa into a blushing mess because he sounds like he is flirting again, even though the two of them are officially broken up. Then Mr. Oblivious casually proposes a political partnership, insisting it is a highly reasonable business deal since their relationship is ancient history now, swearing he has absolutely no intention of ever getting back or reversing the breakup. In short, they are basically just strangers now. Marissa hits him with the coldest death glare, yet she still accepts the deal for the sake of their families. Meanwhile, Chris suddenly feels a sharp chill running down his spine, the kind you get when you realize you just said something incredibly stupid. When they finally meet with Duke Hunt, the leader greets them warmly, though he looks disappointed that Marissa is not calling him dad. Marissa tells him to behave in front of guests, but promises she will join him for dinner later, once she leaves. Chris is pretty surprised to see the Duke acting like a caring father, which is definitely not what he expected from a ruthless poison master. Once they are alone, Chris quickly switches into full formal mode. Duke Hunt praises his maturity but admits that thinking about how Chris treated Marissa in the past makes him want to shred him. Luckily for Chris, the Duke decides to let it slide because Chris saved her life, but then the Duke throws a curveball and questions Chris about his secret connection to the prestigious divine Doctor family. Chris previously claimed he got the rare antidote from an auction, but according to the Duke, no such medicine was sold. Were actually sold at that auction. Cornered, Chris decides to trust his own acting skills, boldly claiming he made the antidote himself. Of course, Duke Kwan obviously doesn't believe a word, but he finds the whole situation amusing enough to let it slide, especially since Chris technically hasn't broken any real laws. Chris lets out a massive sigh of relief and immediately starts planning his getaway, but right as he lets his guard down, Duke Kwan drops an absolute bombshell, inviting Chris to join the fearsome Extreme Poison Clan. Meanwhile, a furious Frisia storms straight into the Marquis's office, raging because Chris destroyed their son Ash's Monacore. Langham tries to quiet her down, begging her to keep her voice down, but Frisia keeps screaming about how that trash Chris is somehow becoming a prince. When Langham just sits there in silence, she decides to take matters into her own hands, planning to handle Chris herself so Ash can regain his rightful title as first prince. Done with the drama, Langham throws up his hands and tells her to do whatever she wants because he has zero energy left to argue with her today. Honestly, this whole royal mess is starting to look like a chaotic family soap opera. Anyway, on Inauguration Day, Marie can't stop gushing over Chris's new outfit, hyping him up like some high-fashion runway model, though our main character is clearly not enjoying the extra attention. That's when his father walks over, grudgingly admitting that his boy actually looks pretty sharp for once. His younger brother offers a quick congrats, but Chris immediately demands the kid address him by his full royal title. The poor kid visibly struggles to say something that cringy in front of their dad, which is honestly pretty fair. Then the Count spots Marissa, asking if Chris finally apologized to her about their broken engagement. Chris instantly recalls her completely wild reaction back then, but quickly tells his dad that yes, it's all handled. Hearing this, his father beams, convinced his son will never find a more perfect, refined lady. He decides to give the young couple some space, walking off with a highly enthusiastic wink and a wish of good luck. Classic dad move, seeing one girl nearby and immediately planning a wedding. Marissa looks totally confused too, but Chris finally realizes what his father is hinting at. Then she congratulates him on his new title, noting that they'll likely be seeing a lot more of each other from now on. She then asks what her father wanted earlier. Chris casually mentions that the Duke basically asked him to marry her. He even feels a strange sense of pride for turning it down, thinking the old man won't bother him about it again. But instead of being pleased, Marissa suddenly looks incredibly hurt by his blunt answer, while our dense main character remains completely clueless about what he did wrong. This guy literally fumbled a proposal and still thinks he deserves a medal. Chris finally makes his way inside the main hall where the official ceremony is taking place, with the crowd already gathered to witness the event. Even the skeptical nobles in attendance have to admit that this former family failure truly earned his new rank. Just then, Marquis Langham and his wife spot a sudden stir in the crowd, gasping as the legendary Dark Clan leader unexpectedly enters the venue. This is an absolutely massive deal because the old patriarch has never attended events like this, but the goth aunt watches closely. She expected this reaction, though even she felt deeply shocked at first. When she first heard the patriarch plan to attend, she warned him about the danger. Other nobles would see this as open support, immediately turning Chris into a target. But the old man insisted on personally testing the brat who claims he will rule. He wanted to see if the kid could actually become their absolute brightest star. Langham looks like someone slapped the soul right out of him, yet he still bows. He offers the old patriarch a seat, and once seated, the elder orders them to proceed. The official inauguration ceremony for Chris begins as the boy slowly steps forward, He receives his brand new title, forcing the man who hates him most to speak. He is forced to declare Chris a prince, cementing the boy's sudden success. Despite securing this massive victory, Chris knows the dark age of destruction is drawing closer. And it is drawing closer. With his current level, he cannot do much, so he needs to grow stronger fast. He must build serious power and influence before the entire world goes to hell. He needs to become the crown prince soon, no pressure, just the entire world collapsing. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, Chris spots a massive dragon soaring in the sky. This isn't just some ordinary beast, it swoops down and crashes into the arena. Landing directly in the center, it gives everyone a clear, terrifying look. They realize it is a decaying undead dragon, and its gaze is locked on Chris. No one understands how a beast like this managed to breach their perimeter defense. Elite soldiers immediately scramble to form a protective wall right in front of him. The beast fires a magical blast, but the soldiers block it with shields. Seeing the dangerous magical beam, Chris's father starts getting pretty agitated. Everyone else watches with suspiciously entertained looks. It is that classic look people get during someone else's disaster. The smirking patriarch notes a pretty interesting gift. Tension immediately spreads as everyone freezes in absolute shock. Cold dread fills the arena, and the goth aunt immediately steps forward. She prepares to handle the beast herself, but the old patriarch quickly stops her. She warns him that a zombie dragon is far beyond the boy's current limits. Still, the old man simply smirks, stands up, and tells everyone to step back. He claims it has been a while since he evaluated the young successor's progress. At the very least, they should be capable of slaying a dragon. Grandpa really turns a deadly crisis into a sudden, highly chaotic family entrance exam. Jupian is the very first to move, charging straight toward the dragon without hesitation. Julian watches her with a smile, calling her hot-blooded. Meanwhile, Maysak turns completely pale at the terrifying prospect of fighting a dragon. But her mother quickly points out that the beast is solely targeting young Chris. She only needs to pretend to fight to survive the background chaos. Charging right onto the battlefield, Jupian launches her signature splitting swords at the beast. But her strikes do absolutely nothing, failing to leave even a single scratch. Meanwhile, Chris sheds his heavy cape and notices the dark mark of the dead. It is a secret necromancy technique designed to control powerful corpses. He has no clue why someone would target him now, but there is simply no time. Just as the dragon keeps launching non-stop attacks, the situation suddenly gets even worse. Its massive wings flap, creating a crushing pressure that shakes everyone to their very bones. Most struggle to even stand. Chris quickly realizes standard demonic energy is completely useless. It does absolutely nothing because even Jupian's strikes failed, and besides, the beast is already dead, meaning destroying its heart is pointless, and using holy magic is too risky. With every single regular solution completely off the table, they are left with zero options. Seeing the massive beast prepare for another strike, Chris shouts for Jupian to get back. Right then, Julian finally decides to step in and save her struggling siblings. In a split second, she conjures a powerful dark bow and lets loose a single arrow. One shot, that is all she needs to obliterate the undead dragon, leaving Chris absolutely shocked at her ridiculous power. This surpasses even Ashid's own insane level of strength. It reaches beyond what a 5-star mage should ever be capable of. Julian is supposedly just a 4-star ranker, but this incredible performance tells a completely different story. She casually deletes a massive dragon and still somehow expects everyone to believe she is just. The stunned crowd breaks out into roaring cheers, but Chris is not celebrating. His mind remains locked on the bizarre technique she just executed. What is weirder is that Julian behaves as though absolutely nothing out of the ordinary occurred. He cannot help but wonder why she is concealing such devastating power. And why is a direct member of the House of Darkness utilizing archery of all things? Suddenly, Julian turns to face him with a calm smile, offering her congratulations. Chris has no other option but to return her congratulations, even while his racing thoughts spiral. His brain is still struggling to comprehend the unbelievable sight he just witnessed. Now that the beast is gone, the panicked spectators slowly snap back to reality and whisper. Whispers break out as guests gossip about rival clans sabotaging the ceremony. To all the onlookers, this blatant interference serves as a dark sign of his future path. He is destined for a life of constant peril. Then Melon takes her chance. She drops down to one knee to formally pledge her absolute loyalty, fulfilling her prior promise. This sudden gesture shocks everyone, the fearsome mad dog of the Black Swamp. Knights actually bowing to another person is something that absolutely nobody expected to witness today. Even Chris is totally caught off guard by this intense show of respect. Still, he accepts her oath anyway. She openly admits she merely wants to challenge him later. Chris warns her she might regret making such a bold claim later. Honestly, that sounds way more like an open invitation to violence than any actual loyalty. Right after, another young man steps up to offer his allegiance as well. Chris has absolutely no clue who this man is until the stranger introduces himself as Kassan. The elder son of House Raman presents their backing as an inauguration gift. But naturally, this seemingly generous gesture comes with a rather troublesome favor attached to it. That specific favor involves finding a spot for their allegedly useless son. Chris instantly remembers the eccentric Aloes, even asking Kassan about his younger brother's pet. Kassan demands his younger brother show proper respect to their new master. Aloes is left utterly frozen with shock, but Kassan completely ignores his little brother's confusion. He formally begs Chris to accept the boy into his personal service. While Aloes breaks down crying, Chris quickly sees right through the noble family's real trick. They are just trying to secure their future by positioning a spy close to him. The boy is not completely useless. During the future age of destruction, he actually makes a big name for himself. The kid has talent, and because of that, Chris feels a bit guilty, since in this timeline he stole the stigmata that originally belonged to him. Still, he accepts Aloes and orders him to survive the brutal ordeal of serving under him. Next, other families start stepping forward one by one to offer their gifts and loyalty. From the sidelines, the patriarch watches with his signature smirk while Chris's father looks on with pride. He can already see Chris slowly winning the trust of the Dark Clan, taking him closer to becoming the crown prince. Meanwhile, Maysak watches this unfold with a bitter expression she simply cannot hide. Her mother quickly notices and reassures her, promising to remove Chris from her sight. Very soon, across the room, the goth aunt is confused about why the patriarch is leaving without even greeting Chris, but the old man says there is no need. In his eyes, the necromancy clan already gave Chris a grand greeting, and that alone draws plenty of attention. Next, the aunt brings up her concern about Julian's unexpected growth, but the old man shows zero interest in it. To him, the only thing that matters is their dark house reaching its peak. He does not care about rules. He points out that Julian has always been greedy since childhood, and if that greed pushes the House of Darkness to the top, he will make her the next patriarch. If someone else surpasses her, that is even better. Even better, elsewhere a hostile group is busy slaughtering elite human soldiers, but even after wiping them out, they still feel unsatisfied. Ironically, they find direct confrontation way too troublesome. They turn to their leader and ask what is on his mind. The man mentions the rumor of a new prince being inaugurated. One of his subordinates suddenly starts making fun of the prince's prestigious house, and in the next second he gets impaled right through the chest. Another tries to protest, same result. After that, nobody dares make a single sound. The man calmly drains the warm blood from their bodies, growing stronger while leaving them behind like dried husks. Talk about dealing with disrespect through instant deletion and a protein shake right after. Once finished, he decides to return home to personally check out this newly crowned prince. Back at the estate, Chris is dealing with a completely different problem. Maria is busy stripping off his clothes completely, unaware that this is probably the least dangerous situation he will ever face. Suddenly, Chris's younger brother sends a cute letter talking about his progress in curse magic and swordsmanship. The kid proudly explains that he is getting much stronger, eagerly wanting to spar once Chris comes. Back home, Chris feels proud too, already planning to make his little brother way stronger than he ever was in his previous life. The goal is simple: turn him into an ultimate secret weapon for the coming age of destruction. Suddenly, Julian catches him smiling like a creep and immediately asks what is so funny. Chris turns to secret weapon number 2 and casually says he just got a letter from his brother. Julian points out that Chris has not been training properly lately, openly wondering if he does it in Secret, Chris offers to teach her, but she immediately refuses, saying he is crazy. Can't even land a single blow on that undead dragon. Chris snaps right back by, reminding her that she has no right to judge when she hasn't even managed to scratch the monster. That shuts her up fast. Still, she mutters under her breath that arguing with him is just a waste of time. Even so, Chris advises her to separate the illusion from her ego, warning that otherwise it will never move. On its own, that completely catches Jupian off guard, shocked that he knows anything about illusion magic. Chris calmly explains that he actually studied it for roughly 3 months. Jupian is now incredibly irritated by this arrogant genius bastard. Chris actually learned that magic from a 9-star great mage, so annoyingly enough, he really has the credentials to act this smug. Suddenly, as if she can't stand watching Jupian talk to Chris, Maysak jumps in and tells her she's lowering her status by mingling with a mere bug from the collateral branch. Jupian immediately tells her to shut up because she stinks. And she doesn't stop there. She straight up says Maysak's breath smells like a sewer, telling her to keep quiet for everyone's sake. Maysak gets furious that Jupian is taking his side, but Jupian quickly clarifies that she still absolutely hates Chris. It is just that Maysak's breath is even more disgusting. That only fuels Maysak's anger, and she starts thinking that she would have already dealt with Jupian if her father wasn't such an important retainer. Then Chris speaks up. She stinks too. That's the final blow, and Maysak snaps. She vents all her rage onto him, going full attack mode instantly, threatening to end him with a single punch. She even openly doubts that he made any real contribution during the relic expedition. Chris meanwhile calmly watches. High-level dark energy is pouring out of her. Honestly, it is not surprising, considering her mother Phrygia is a direct descendant of the Destruction Mage family. Even so, Maysak is only at the lower 4th level, meaning she is still no match for him, so he calmly invites her to a clash of dark energy if she really wants to prove her strength. Naturally, Maysak takes the bait almost immediately. Seriously, she is way too predictable, but just as she reaches out to accept, Phrygia arrives and stops her. She warns her daughter not to unleash dark energy so carelessly, telling her to set a proper date if she wants to fight properly. Then she turns to Chris, inviting him to her office to discuss a few things. Chris is pleasantly surprised because a much bigger fish just swallowed the bait. Soon, Chris finds himself sitting right in front of Phrygia, daughter of the patriarch of the Destruction Mage family, thanks to her bloodline, which places her family in the top 5 out of 12 prestigious magic families. She holds immense influence, second only to Langham, and her only biological daughter is Maysak. Since Ashid, the first in line, lost power, Phrygia is absolutely going to do everything possible to make Maysak the next successor, which means Chris is probably the first target on her hit list. And just as expected, she starts by congratulating him before immediately scolding him for raising his voice against Maysak. She even demands that he gets along with her daughter like a younger brother. Chris is easily sharp enough to hear the real message beneath all that fake politeness. She is basically telling him to kneel beneath Maysak and know his place, so he answers her in the most. He insults her in every way possible, claiming Maysak lacks the capacity to be an older sister. If anything, she should be the one dropping to her knees to serve him as her older brother. That way, she might actually keep her life when he eventually becomes the patriarch. Hearing this, Phrygia completely snaps. Her dark energy explodes so violently that the cups between them instantly shatter, completely soaking Chris. She is more than capable of ending him on the spot right now, but Chris stays absolutely calm. He knows his status as a prince protects him, and harming him directly would trigger massive conflict even she cannot ignore. Knowing this, Phrygia immediately shifts to her backup plan. She announces that Maysak wants to spar and pressures him to except. Chris has no issue with that, so she tells him to wait for the official date. On top of that, she promises she will assign instructors for him, since it would be unfair for Maysak to crush a newly appointed prince who has not even been properly trained yet. Her words are dripping with fake generosity, but Chris politely thanks her and leaves. And of course, this meeting went exactly as he expected. He already knows his peaceful days are officially over. Sure enough, Phrygia begins her dark schemes the very next day.